What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto blessed by God's Sasuke bashing? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Throw an elbow, step forward, palm strike and stomp. This is the combo that Naruto used to take down Sasuke and have him sent to the emergency room. Kakashi was extremely disappointed in Naruto. The enthusiastic little soldier had disobeyed orders during the fight and had used a move to damage Sasuke in a dangerous way that had many potential consequences. Kakashi sighed. Naruto had to learn to follow orders and calm down before they accepted any mission outside the village. And by the way, his team had been getting antsy that would be soon. Something had to be done now, and Kakashi knew exactly what. That last mover was illegal. Naruto, did you even listen to the rules? Kakashi reprimanded as he put away his ever-present book. I'm sorry sensei, I just really wanted to win this time and get the taijutsu scroll. But Sasuke was so close to winning and I was just so angry, Naruto rambled trying to explain his actions. Besides, all you do is teach Sasuke. You don't even show me and Sakura anything new, so I knew I had to win or else I would never learn anything. I trained Sasuke because he's ready for it. I need you and Sakura at a certain level that you can only reach through personal training. Sakura neglects her physical training and you neglect mental conditioning, nor would you listen to me as you would be more concerned with the awesome jutsu I'm about to teach you than the importance of it, Kakashi explained as he stood firmly. Besides, this isn't about that. You could have killed Sasuke if that stomp had hit in the right place. As punishment for disobeying orders you are suspended for the next week. Don't bother attending training. That's so unfair, Naruto growled as he stepped closer to Kakashi only to be grabbed by the face and pushed away, with Kakashi dropping the scroll in his hands. You won the scroll, but was it really worth it in the end? Kakashi asked. You could have killed your teammate because of your thoughtlessness. Think about that, Naruto. Kakashi sighed again and walked away, leaving Naruto alone in the hospital lobby. I'll show you, Naruto grumbled as he walked off to Hokage's tower. Hachimon. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat at his desk, diligently filling out forms for the shinobi forces budget, dividing the money between the numerous divisions and sending the extra funds for approved projects throughout the multiple departments. When he was done with this, he still had to look over some of the higher risk missions, determine the risk factors of accepting the request, political backlash, ambush, military retaliation, and then accept it or not and send back correspondence through Kahona's private messenger NIN system. After that, it was handling request from the council to give military approval for appropriation of land to be used to expand suburbs or even commercial use. All in all, most paperwork that passed over his desk was just mundane to him, but its purpose was to help pass time between his duties on the council, overseeing the shinobi, clan, elder and civilian councils and putting aside any motions needed to be brought up in joint session, and his training. However, today's paperwork was extremely mentally draining today, and unusually so. Hiruzen chalked it up to the ever-increasing number of senior moments he was having as he advanced in age and the stress of the high-profile job. He would welcome any distraction at that moment just so he could excuse himself and go fetch a cup of tea at his favorite tea house. That's when he heard the loud knocking. Ah, great timing, Naruto, he said with a smile as he hit the intercom. Let the boy in, he knows not to bother me for nothing unimportant. Granted, Naruto did know that and just didn't listen. With a groan, the secretary let Naruto in, and Sarutobi immediately sensed the mood. What's wrong, Naruto? Sarutobi asked with grandfatherly concern. Kakashi banned me from the team for a week due to a sparring incident, Naruto almost shouted in his rage. Why? Sarutobi asked with a genuine curiosity. What had Naruto done to get suspended? So I was sparring Sasuke and I started winning, but I got carried away and used a stomp, but I didn't do much, just dislocate his shoulder, Naruto admitted. But he took the same injury recovery training course I did, and I know they dislocated both his shoulders about 6 times throughout the class, Naruto defended. The injury recovery training program was on its last legs, but had gathered quite an interest from dedicated students and those looking to overcome a fear of pain. It was designed to train dislocations, and at first repeatedly dislocated limbs surgically and then forced it to train an ability to pop joints back into sockets. While the skill itself was of little use, it did train pain tolerance and give some people an edge in combat. Sasuke and Naruto were the last two students of the course, and had excelled at it so much that the escape course also noticed an improvement from the both of them, thanks to the ability to loosen their shoulders and slip through bindings. Naruto, a stomp, as simple as it is not something to be thrown around lightly. Many use it as a quick dispatch to knock out or even kill their opponents. You shouldn't really use it on an ally at all. Besides, you could have caused more damage than you know, regardless of temperament. Hiruzen explained in a grandfatherly way. He found Naruto listened to advice better than being reprimanded. But Kakashi can't ban me from practice, Naruto countered. He doesn't even train me or Sakura, and he says cause I wouldn't be able to handle it cause of mental conditioning. Hiruzen sighed. Naruto was extremely stubborn, maybe too much for his own good. Kakashi is your commanding officer Naruto, he can do anything with liable reason, and furthermore mental conditioning is important to any ninja, and the earlier you learn it the better, Hiruzen explained as he walked towards the door, intent on taking his well-deserved break. I guess you're right, Naruto said, dejected at the lack of support for his side from his grandfather figure, but understood the situation completely. Izanagi no Makoto. Naruto had decided to retreat to one of his usual places that he could find comfort, Ichiraku ramen stand, which stood in the center of the market region, which was occupied by many different booths looking to sell food and wares, and so the street itself was usually pretty empty. People would pass by occasionally with shopping bags, whispering and looking over their shoulder at Naruto in disdain and worry. Uhhg, sometimes I just wish they would sock me in the jaw or something. If they did I could take it, but all these glares and whispers are just starting to get to me. Naruto grumbled loud enough for the old man behind the counter to hear him. What's wrong with you Naruto? You haven't been worked up about that in a long time, Tucci said as he placed a bowl of ramen in front of the boy, which soon disappeared. Kakashi suspended me for a week because I stomped Sasuke and dislocated his shoulder in a spar. Then he said he wouldn't train me because my mental conditioning isn't up to speed. I tried talking to Gramps, but he agrees with Kakashi, so nothing from him. Naruto rambled as he played with the last noodle in the bowl. Well, it's none of my business, but I've overheard many shinobi talk about the art of meditation positively. Used properly you can become more aware, focus your mental strength, and even remember small little details that could save your life, Tucci explained as he prepared another bowl of ramen. I've even heard you can use meditation to also block out all your senses, even the awareness of time. Some even train themselves to do it in combat. They call it battle meditation or something weird like that. He said offhandedly, his eyes darting around before placing another bowl, which disappeared just as quickly as the last one. Battle meditation? Naruto perked up excited. That sounds badass. He shouted in excitement as he leapt onto the seat and leaned on the counter. How do I do it? Come on Tucci, Naruto began dancing on his toes in excitement. No clue, Tucci said, point and simple, causing Naruto to fall out of the stool. They say everyone learns differently, you just got to start meditating to begin to learn, he explained as he chuckled. I overheard that the best way is to find a place where you are at peace, sit down and think. Keep thinking until all the thoughts in your little head are gone. And relax, Tucci instructed as Naruto clumsily wrote it down on a napkin. Alright, Naruto shouted, thanks old man. I got to get going since I have 1 week to be up to speed in my mental training. He laughed as ran off to his apartment to grab some camping gear. At this moment Ayame walks into the storefront with a bit of a smirk on her face as she dried her hands. You're a liar, she said as she dropped the smirk and looked out with a worried look to Naruto's back. He's going to be so disappointed when he learns the truth, that you made up everything you know about meditation. Some of it's true, Tucci argued as he picked up the bowls and carried them to the back. Besides, by the time he realizes it, his bull-headed pride will refuse to admit that he was tricked and he will continue to do it. Tucci went back to minding his store while his daughter Ayame shook her head. She was briefly thought about going after Naruto and telling him the truth but realized it was for the best. Naruto needed to calm down a bit if was to ever survive as a shinobi. Izanami no Makoto. Determined to attain battle meditation, Naruto packed for the week so he wouldn't be disturbed for long while he tried to gain the ability. He also knew of a place that no one else could get to, or knew about for that matter, on the Hokage monument just above the fort's head. It was a small cliff-like area that was backed by a cave. Naruto figured it was caused by the construction of the refugee tunnels into the mountain, but never really dug into the history books enough to find out. Setting up a temporary home inside the surprisingly spacious cave, Naruto walked out onto the cliff and sat down at its edge, crossed his legs, and took a deep breath. He slowly crawled through his thoughts, dismissing them with simple nonsense answers to his pointless questions, and barred himself from thinking anything more. His thoughts slowly ran themselves out till all that was left was blankness of thoughts. Naruto felt himself slipping from the meditative state and decided to focus his thoughts one to his relaxing. He felt himself drip deeper and deeper into the state. The only thing he kept track of was his breathing. Then Naruto heard the sound of dripping water, and he was shocked out of the state by the sudden sound. Is it raining or something? Naruto questioned as he looked around and found nothing but a sunset. Wow, I've been out here longer than I thought, Naruto mumbled, his smile brightening as he realized the achievement he just made. As he celebrated, he noticed a figure sitting on the side of the cliff just above when he was climbing up, which was harder with the stiff legs. Naruto stepped up beside her and tapped her on the shoulder. She suddenly shot up in shock as she slid off the cliff's edge and onto safe ground. She looked up in shock and stared at Naruto, amazing the young boy with her beauty, before her face turned to one of worry. Hey miss, what are you doing up here? Naruto asked. They usually close the mountain's visitor site after 6, and judging by the sunset it's way past that now. The woman just backed away in shock. You can see me? She stuttered. Naruto just looked at the woman like she was crazy, which she might have been, since no one dressed like this woman to sit on a mountainside. He stepped forward, causing her to shuffle back. He cocked an eyebrow and looked at her with his usual confused squint. Yeah, I can see you. I know I'm not that smart, but I'm not stupid, so don't think you can pull one over on me, Naruto grumbled. He hated admitting that sometimes, but it got the message through clearly. No, you don't understand, the worried woman said as she rose from the ground, both her voice and motions leaving an elegant and powerful air around her. You must avert your eyes, quickly young one, she pleaded in her melodic voice. The panicking lady just groaned. You ignorant child, just please listen to me, the woman pleaded. Stop looking at me and break your focus. You're seeing things you aren't meant to see, she commanded of Naruto, just making him scoff. Yeah right lady, I've seen many things I'm not supposed to see already, so if you're up here to enjoy the sunset in the nude or something, I'm not stopping ya, Naruto said offhanded, completely oblivious of the face the woman made as he said that. You vulgar child, she said in shock. Hey, I'm not a child you crazy bitch, Naruto shouted angrily, getting fed up by the conversation with this pretty, yet weird woman and this sudden feeling of heat rising underneath his skin. Crazy bitch. The woman repeated in shock, which slowly turned to rage. Crazy bitch. She practically screamed. Here I am trying to help save you from an untimely fate, and you have the audacity to call me Amaterasu Omakami, the goddess of the sun, a crazy bitch, the woman announced. Wait, what? Naruto was now only confused. Amaterasu was standing in front of him. That was impossible. No one could look at the spirits without something being wrong, or the spirit being cast out, and Amaterasu would never be cast out of the kami. So why did this crazy bitch think she was a sun goddess? His eyes started to water like he was staring into the sun for too long, and his skin began to feel taut like he was sun-burned. For your insolence you shall be punished. Ye who dared peek into the Kunitsu, earthly realm. You were warned. Divert your gaze or be burned by my power. Yet you did not listen, Amaterasu stated as she raised her arms, then shoved them forward. With this blast I cast you from my sight and out of the earthly realm. A sudden flare of energy escaped from the center of her palms and slammed into Naruto. The blast hurt a bit, but there was no major physical harm it seemed. However, the blast did have force and sent a disoriented Naruto stumbling over the cliff. As he fell back, he saw the figure of the woman begin to slowly fade as the energy continued to lick and burn his form. Naruto went plummeting over the edge, but luckily hit the ledge at which he decided to camp. He still fell quite a ways and was knocked unconscious by the fall as his skin steadily turned a deep burnt red, but he would survive, if someone found him, that is. Luckily for Naruto, someone or something had been watching him. It wasn't long before a petite young woman about Naruto's age landed her feet on the ledge. Her hair was long and green, held back by two clips, one red and spiraled and the other blue and shaped like a leaf. And the only thing that adorned her generously busty body was a simple sleeveless white cloth dress that was held shut by a weaved thick brown cord. Leaning down, she ran her fingers through Naruto's hair and smiled while mumbling his name. Grabbing him by his shoulders, she then dragged Naruto into the cave, with a frown. "You saved me in my hour of need, Naruto. It's time I returned the favor," she said as she stripped him of his shirt, wrapped his eyes, and began to smear some sort of salve onto this skin before slipping him into the sleeping bag he had brought and dumping him on his cot. The girl then left, but vowed to the unconscious boy that she would soon return. When she did, a pattern began to appear on Naruto's exposed chest, right over his heart. It began with 4 tomo bleeding in as it was surrounded by a circle with white triangles pointing out and black pointing in. After that, 10 little black triangles appeared, surrounded by 10 larger triangles, forging a stylized symbol of the sun onto Naruto's skin. Naruto groaned as he woke up from his unconscious slumber, and panicked when he could not open his eyes before realizing it was just a cloth wrapped around them. His skin hurt, and from the burning in his eyes he wouldn't dare take off the bandages just yet, not until someone told him what was going on. So he sat there, trying to calm down and use the little bit he knew about mediation. Taking a deep breath, Naruto used his remaining senses to determine where he was. Okay, the ground is cold and rough against my head, reminds me of the cave. And since I can hear that annoying white noise, I guess it's after midnight or so, since local station's quite plain at 11. But I don't know if I'm still Konoha. Wait, I'm in my sleeping bag, I know that much. There's still the small tear at the toes and the hole in the netting near my fingers from when I was recovering from white root poisoning. And the bucket is still next to me collecting water. Naruto thought, thank Inari. I wasn't kidnapped or something, but how did I get so burned? And why are my eyes covered? Who covered them? Naruto wondered aloud, sure that he was alone. You make weird faces while you think, a feminine voice commented bluntly, making Naruto sputter in embarrassment since he couldn't sense her. Who the fuck are you? Naruto shouted in a moment of fear and confusion that wasn't helped by his blind state. Ama-chan was right. You are rude. The girl said bluntly again, this time with a bubbly tone. Ama-chan? You mean that really pretty lady sitting on top of the cliff that thought she was Amaterasu? Naruto asked in wonder as he reached for the bandages only to be stopped. That was Amaterasu that you insulted, I can assure you. If she hadn't pushed you from the cliff, her presences would have burnt you to a crisp. The bubbly voice said before sighing. I'll just show you, she said as she began to violently tear at the bandages around Naruto's eyes. See, she said, pointing to a mark on his chest, right above his heart. For a few moments Naruto saw nothing as the light slowly filtered into his injured eyes. As the vision returned, he vaguely saw the frustrated woman pointing down and looked. At that moment his vision recovered. There was a strange sun-like symbol on his chest right where the girl was pointing to. Okay, first, who are you? Naruto asked in confusion and wonder, still trying to get everything through his head. I am the spirit of the Konoha forest and the lands that your village stands on, she said, suddenly gaining an extremely regal tone. And you have gained an ability no mortal should ever have. Okay, I'll bite, Naruto scoffed, refusing to believe a crazy girl even if she was pretty. What did I do? He asked sarcastically. When you began your meditation, you incidentally fell into the sage state and began drawing in energy from the kunitsu instead of the normal natural energy. Mostly because this cave used to be an entrance to a very powerful sun cult. This allowed you to peer into the kunitsu and see Amaterasu as she watched her sunset. The girl explained, shrinking Naruto's skepticism. After that you began to draw energy from Amaterasu and eventually from her attack, coupled by the fact you almost died. Congratulations. You are now capable of communicating with and touching spirits. The spirit of Konoha said as she bent over, her top dropping down, exposing her chest a bit and making Naruto blush. Okay, I'll buy it for now. But why are you the spirit of the forest of Konoha? Or better, why are you a woman? Naruto asked, letting his mouth get ahead of him. For some reason though, this made the young lady chipper instead of angry or insulted. Because I'm young, beautiful, and really fertile, making Naruto just sweat drop. Apparently the spirit of Konoha is also shameless and airheaded, Naruto thought as he watched the spirit suddenly try and fix her top by grabbing her own chest in a rather rough-looking fashion, before turning her attention back to him. I also know who you are, Naruto Uzumaki. I've watched you for a long time and I know you're the only person who truly loves this village in its entirety, despite its shortcomings, despite the fact that the people so blatantly try and ignore you, like that time you tripped in the market's sprawl district and were almost trampled to death. All because they refused to acknowledge you as anything more than a stepping stone. And you still love this place? The woman whispered as she turned around and hugged him, weeping heavily into his shoulders. No being in Kunitsu Kami or Amatsu Kami has ever shown such spirit. You truly are a wonderful person, the spirit said as she continued to weep, leaving Naruto to try and comfort her. Geez, this chick is emotional, Naruto thought as he tried to calm her down, hoping to be free of the emotional suffocation. Inari. It was the next morning when Naruto finally departed from the cave. Konoha followed him cheerfully, carefully explaining every detail of his new ability. A little note about your new ability is that you can only see certain kami. More powerful ones can evade your sight and weaker ones are usually gathered together in spirit wells, kind of like communities for lesser kami since they are so numerous. If you find one you can probably jump right in and… Konoha never got to finish. Yes, I know you've already explained this like 15 times, Naruto almost groaned. Seriously, for such a smart girl she was really forgetful. I must have forgotten again. Oh, look, an antique shop, the girl shouted, dragging the poor boy with her, grabbing the attention of many passerbys. What's so interesting, Naruto, as he looked at the various mirrors around the shop, noting a lack of the green-haired girl in front of him as they passed. You can find numerous holy relics if you know where to look. I know for a fact that there was one here, just the other. Here it is. Konoha shouted loudly, making some of the glasses shake as she held up a strange gold medallion. Naruto took a quick look at a nearby mirror to see the object floating inside. Konoha, can anyone else see you? He asked, fearing he already knew the answer. Well, no, I don't even have a reflection in the mortal plane. A sudden shriek from the shop owner startled Konoha, making her start to shriek too, making the glasswares of the shop break haphazardly, sending shards flying in all directions. Naruto grabbed the amulet and cojones and began running. Naruto threw open the door and it phased through Konoha as it closed. Naruto set curse for his home, deciding to skip the lunch he had planned in reward. He made a haste decision and leapt up onto the bridges on the market's second story and continued climbing until he reached the giant shuriken that marked the largest weapons supplier of the Leaf Village. Naruto stopped and hid behind the giant metal star and began to pant as he took a closer look at the metal, and then noticed the arms around his waist and the head buried in his groin. That was so scary, the emotional spirit cried as she hugged Naruto's legs together tighter. Well, it's your fault. You just can't go around being unseen and picking things up, people will freak. Naruto shot, his anger over the situation apparent. Konoha's eyes got big and teary, as if she was threatening to start crying all over again. Why are you being so mean? Naruto groaned and tried to comfort the wide-eyed girl before she started going ballistic. Why do I have the strange feeling that this is going to be a normal thing? Naruto thought as he continued to rub her back, stifling her tears but making her try and grip him tighter. Ahem, so, Naruto began, getting the attention of the still teary-eyed Konoha. What was so important about this medallion that we had to go get it? Konoha just stared at him wide-eyed before breaking out in a beaming smile. No clue. This admission almost made Naruto fall off the side of the roof. All I know is that it is a sacred relic of the kami and is typically gifted to anyone who manages to gain one's favor. I also know that if you find a kami with combat knowledge, that medallion will allow you to learn it. What happens if it's stolen? Naruto asked as he draped the medallion around his neck. Nothing, unless it's charged with natural energy, but even then you would need how to use the techniques behind it, so still nothing, Konoha explained. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you have no combat knowledge. Naruto guessed, receiving a cute little confused nod from the patron spirit of the forest surrounding his quaint little village of deadly assassins. Naruto sighed, okay. Well, given what happened last time, I tried to learn meditation. I guess for the rest of the week I'm learning that taijutsu Kakashi gave me, and I feel like I should be getting home and studying it first. Why? That sounds so unlike you. Konoha replied in a shocked tone. Cause after the trouble at the antique store I think we want to lay low, Naruto said as he saw several members of the military police run by. Nigi no Makoto. A tired Naruto rose from his desk in his study room, which was actually a second bedroom, but since he had no roommate or anything he had it converted into a study. The walls were literally littered with potential jutsu formulas, for techniques that couldn't and shouldn't even exist. Various scrolls also lay sprawled out across the floor, detailing ninjutsu, taijutsu, fujutsu and genjutsu. Discarded and stepped on, the pages crumbled around the shape of feet. He had spent the day studying the scroll and determining what the taijutsu called for. It was called Muay Thai and it was extremely simple in theory and extremely deadly in practice. The use of knees and elbows was not uncommon in a shinobi's taijutsu, but they were thrown in at random when people got too close, or if someone had grabbed a hold of you. This style actually had a set of movements to utilize effectively and put into practice the use of elbows, plus the physical conditioning for it would end up turning anyone into a taijutsu juggernaut. Luckily Naruto was at a point where it would be no problem. With a smile Naruto yawned as he walked towards his bed, noticing the distinct lack of the kami girl. With a yawn Naruto decided to forego the pajamas and just toss off all his clothes due to the current heatwave rolling through Konoha. So there in his bed Naruto laid, nude as the day as he was born, slowly falling asleep when he felt someone climb into the bed and join him in slumber. It was Konoha, her cute face lighting up in a cheerful smile as she tried to snuggle up to Naruto. Normally Naruto would have paid it no mind, but given the fact that he was wearing nothing, and thanks to Konoha pressing up against him he knew that she wore nothing either. Konoha. Naruto called out, shaking from her sleeping state. Huh? The girl said as she shot up and looked Naruto in the eye. Oh yeah? You can see me now, she said groggily as a yawn stopped her. So I'm guessing you've actually slept in my bed often? Naruto stated, though it was more of a question than a statement. Almost every day for the past 2 years. Konoha said as she grabbed onto Naruto's side with a strong hold. You, see me do anything? Naruto asked nervously, an embarrassed look on his face. Yes, sometimes I even participated. Now go to sleep, Konoha had told him as she nudged him to shut him up. Easy for you to say, Naruto thought. You weren't raped by a spirit. Aim no Uzume. After a week of training in both meditation and Muay Thai, Naruto returned to active duty. His short-term suspension finished after an enlightening and embarrassing week. Team 7 had been gathered in full to welcome Naruto back to their group, even Kakashi, who had made sure to be early so he could finish the example that he had set for Sasuke and Sakura using Naruto, who in all honesty was the one most likely to get a suspension from duty first. Whether it be insubordination or injury was a mystery. However, they weren't expecting Naruto to have changed much over the week-long suspension, and they were thoroughly surprised by the changes in Naruto's gear. The presence of orange was still strong and was in most of his outfit, but it had been cut back drastically from when the team had last seen him. He now wore a fur-lined orange vest with a black shirt instead of the jacket and opted to keep his arms wrapped up to the elbows that now sported the beginnings of calluses. He also opted to wear shorts instead of pants, and like his arms the rest were bound up to the exposed joint. He also kept 2 knife pouches bound to the side of his shins and 2 large shuriken pouches attached to his new belt. The strangest things though were the ordinary strapped sandals and the gold medallion just hanging around his neck. So what do you guys think? Naruto asked with a chuckle, earning a few flat looks from his team and his new spiritual companion. It doesn't matter what they think, Naruto, I'm the one picked it all out, Konoha grumbled as she turned to find a seat somewhere out on the field. His team on the other hand had a different reaction. Is this all you did on suspension, Naruto? Get a new wardrobe? Kakashi asked, preparing to go into a speech about responsibility. Nope, this is just better suited for the taijutsu style from the scroll. I've been practicing all week along with my meditation. Naruto practically shouted in excitement, shocking his teammates and putting a surprised smile on his sensei's face. Well then, how about a spar to begin today's training session? Sasuke versus Naruto. Let's see how the past week has changed you both, and remember, avoid any lethal blows and it's over when I say. Kakashi gave a stern look to both Sasuke and Naruto, who only nodded back, as they walked out onto the field and took their starting points. Begin. After the last bout, Sasuke was weary of Naruto. If pressured, Naruto would be backed into a corner and lash out with a strong combo. Also, given his recent training, no matter how little, and his superior endurance, Sasuke was left with attacking hard to disorient, then a simple combo to batter him, followed by a trip and another hard strike to send him to the ground with another. Predictable, yes, but Naruto's current form was inexperienced and the combo was a luckily shot, so Sasuke basically had the spar in the bag if he could just land the first shot. Sasuke smirked as he realized Naruto was thinking the same in terms of the first punch, but he moved too early. Naruto moved forward with a right punch. Sasuke moved around it to avoid the inside and ended up getting hit with an elbow and then a strike from the left. Sasuke was sent tumbling but recovered. He rubbed the side of his face that had gotten hit and thought over the last attack. Damn, it seems this taijutsu style focuses on punches and elbows. So a front attack won't work and attacking from the side could prove difficult, from behind it is. With a new plan of action, Sasuke ran forward, ducked and skid under Naruto's punch and deprived him of the opportunity for an elbow, only to be stricken with a front kick, lifting Sasuke up to be battered by an assault of punches and elbows. Luckily Sasuke never took a beating without learning a little something. It seemed Naruto's taijutsu style used both arms and legs to attack, and if elbows were used it was safe to assume knees would be thrown in there too. 8 points of striking were now available to Naruto. This called for a new plan of action. Sasuke dodged the first strike by Naruto, who had charged forward, and went under the second. Sasuke threw a punch at point blank, using his body's rotation to increase power, into Naruto's stomach, making him buckle over. A solid uppercut followed suit and made Naruto stumble back, but he lashed out with a chop as soon as Sasuke tried to repeat the combo. Sasuke and Naruto then engaged into a clash of fists, starting and breaking combos, both of them gathering bruises until Sasuke took a single step back. Naruto then used a leg push to make Sasuke back up as Kakashi called the match. It was then that Sasuke noticed something. Naruto looked exhausted. It was the one look he thought he would never see on Naruto. "Okay Dobi, what's going on? There is no way your taijutsu is that good after 1 week. And it's almost impossible for you to exhaust yourself. So why is it that we fought to a standstill and you actually looked the part for once?" Sasuke questioned with a shout, which only made Naruto start to laugh. "I'm so good at it because Muay Thai is so simple. It's basically instructions for punching and kicking better. So naturally I picked it up quickly because it polished and added to my current technique. As for the exhaustion, well, it's a simple side effect. You see, Muay Thai demands that you always strike at full power, so it's not meant to trade blows but to deal damage quickly," Naruto explained as he trudged over to the river and dunked his head in to cool off. He turned back to Kakashi afterwards and looked him straight in his single eye. "Can I go? I've heard about these taijutsu experts that apparently have more stamina than me, so I need to talk to them about conditioning, so I can fully use Muay Thai." "You must be talking about Guy. There is no need for that. I know all his training methods that he uses for physically conditioning," Kakashi said, his eye curving to eye smile. "You will join me and Sasuke in training from now on." Sasuke grunted, but held some relief at no longer being the sole person subjected to the torture called training. Naruto, though, did not bother to hide his happiness. "Really, that is so awesome, Kakashi-sensei. But how do you know Guy's training methods?" Kakashi seemed to get a little bashful. "When you've been a ninja as long as I have, you'll take your fair share of injuries sooner or later," Kakashi explained before bringing up his story. "A few years back I was on a mission that ended with me falling off a cliff. Luckily I survived, but it took weeks of physical therapy to just walk again. After that, Guy helped me get back up to speed. I remember some of the exercises we used, so we'll be doing those." "Awesome," Naruto shouted again in excitement. "Right, awesome." Kakashi's smile slowly turned into a stare that caught both Sasuke and Naruto's attention. "For the next 2 months I will be running you two into the ground with physical training. This is your only warning. Back out now," Kakashi warned, making a chill run down the two boys' spines. Naruto responded with thumbs up. "Who do you think you're talking to?" Naruto quipped, making Kakashi chuckle as he turned around and beckoned for them to follow. As they left, Konoha sat above the bridge on the torii gate-styled arch, smiling as she saw the trio walk off. She got up and went to follow them while whispering to herself, "There are great things ahead of him." Naruto raced across the floor, scrubbing diligently as he stepped forward, pushing his weight into each scrub. Sweat dropped from his forehead, mixing with the water on the soapy floor. Training that day had been exhausting and his weekly services to the local temple were not helping. "Why are you doing this?" a young woman asked as she stepped into the room, her robe being dampened by the soapy floor. Naruto only smiled. "To replace meditation. I needed an activity which taught temperament, and so I turned here. I thought a temple would have a good method of teaching temperate, and I was told it's through service. Naruto said as he finished his scrubbing and moved to the sponge mop to soak up the water from the drenched floor. Sounds stupid, the young priestess in training said as she wandered off, probably to go hang out in the garden that Konoha liked to frequent. Naruto smirked. It was stupid, mostly because the entire meditation thing was a ruse. He did the service because Konoha had told him that service to the temple would help him easily gain access to the spiritual energies locked inside him once it becomes available to draw upon. There was also the side effect of improving his image among the populace, but Naruto wasn't concerned about the village's opinions about him anymore, only his ninja training. As Naruto finished his inner musings, he finished mopping the floors of the temple's main rotunda and put his tools aside. Shedding the robes that he wore while working at the temple, he folded them and threw them over his shoulder and left, whistling a tune as he stared out to the sunset that signaled the end of his day. Spirits. Sakura stood in the middle of the library's many corridors, doing volunteer work to earn a few the privileges to use the library after hours. While Naruto seemed to be focusing to the spiritual through service and meditation, Sakura had dwelled deeper into her studies and had accelerated her learning in many theoretical aspects of the shinobi arts. When she had time, she would go out and practice them. She would even practice while in the library, when no one was looking, of course. With a peek to the left and a peek to the right, Sakura was assured that the corridor formed by the tall packed bookcases was empty. With a blush, she reached into her back pocket and pulled out an old dusty novel, a rather smutty piece that she had found in one of the private reading rooms people used to study. The squeak of the library cart's wheels sound and Sakura immediately stashed the novel back in her back pocket. "Sakura dearie, I have some good news for you. Are you here?" rang the aged old voice of the old librarian. "Yes, Mrs. Yamamoto, I'm here," Sakura said as she approached the old woman pushing the cart. "Good, I have something to show you." The old woman trailed off as she let go of the cart and beckoned Sakura to follow her as she shuffled along the floor to the back of the library where the studies were located. The two reached the back, passing through the halls made by the various little cubicles that dotted the floor. They then reached halls dotted with little offices made up the private studies that could be reserved or even rented. Sakura's eyes kept wandering, looking around for anything out of place that may be what the old woman needed to show her. They reached the end of the hall and approached a strange staircase that wrapped around itself going up to the second floor. "Help me up the stairs, Sakura. My old bones find going up these steps too daunting to go alone and I'm afraid I may fall," Mrs. Yamamoto said as Sakura had her hand, ready to move forward and catch her should she slip or pass out. At the end of the stairs was a fairly large door. It was dusty and looked like it had not been touched in years. The kind old woman grabbed a key and plucked it from the chain, unlocked the door and handed the key to Sakura. "Here you go, dearie," she said, pushing the door open delicately, making the double doors strangely swing open. It was a private study unlike any other: stocked shelves, custom leather furniture, a fireplace, and a large table-like desk. Sakura stared at it in amazement and ran to the other end, swinging open a pair of glass doors that lead out onto a balcony overlooking the entire library floor. Mrs. Yamamoto chuckled, her old voice rasping out the joyful sound. "This is the head librarian's office, or it used to be," the old woman explained. "Since I'm the head librarian, I can use this office at any time. Only problem is my advanced age keeps me from going up the stairs. Besides, I'm not one to sit in an office all day. This is why I'm giving it to you. 24/7 access to the archives is now at your fingertips and a perfect little getaway for you to focus on your studies in. As a thanks for all the work you put in here." The old woman smiled before turning away. "Now would you mind helping me downstairs?" "Spirits." Sasuke grunted as he pried himself off the ground. His muscles ached and refused to move. Unfortunately, they didn't have a choice in the matter as Sasuke forced himself on the notion of pure will to move forward and head home to ice down his limbs. He had to keep up with Naruto after all, and the knucklehead just seemed to be progressing at such a high rate compared to him. Results that took Sasuke weeks took Naruto half that time, and it was beginning to grate on him. So Sasuke threw himself into training, and while the time was still the same, it seemed the results surpassed those of Naruto's. Of course, neither could beat each other in a fight yet. Sasuke managed to be able to deal more damage with each passing day, but Naruto had also learned to be able to absorb the same amount of damage. Add in Sasuke's ever-increasing speed and improving reflexes, it was an unstoppable force meeting an unmovable force. Naruto was only managing to scrape victories off by outlasting him, which annoyed him to no end, or it would have if Naruto's face wasn't swollen shut every time. However, it all meant nothing, the only thing that did was power. Sasuke did feel a sense of camaraderie amongst Team 7, but they all seemed to seek a sort of solace in different and conflicting paths. While Sasuke trained his body, Sakura trained her mind, and Naruto explored his spirituality, something that seemed out of place for the blonde. Sasuke concluded that the team's roles were clear though. Naruto was a tank, expendable and hard to kill, great for causing massive amounts of damage and not much else. Sakura was the brain drawing the targets away from the fray, and Sasuke was the specialist, who took down the target once alone and set the scene that would allow the tank to escape alive, if he had lasted that long. They were in simpler terms a team assembled on the classic assault squad formula, more than the academy top student, last student, mid-rank, even if it was unintended. One thing was obvious from the beginning though, he didn't have to be alone anymore. For now he simply chose to be. Spirit. This damn cat is getting on my nerves, Naruto grumbled as he carried the purring cat, which only moments earlier was trying to claw out his eyes. This is what? The 8th time we've caught this damn cat, Sasuke added before Sakura ran up beside him. 10, if you count those 2 times he managed to escape when we first started taking these missions, she said, holding out her hands to take the cats from Naruto, who gladly leapt over to her. How did you get this cat so darn calm? Sakura asked. Just a little scratch behind the ears and a gentle hold. It's like someone is strangling this cat or something if that's all it takes to calm it down, Naruto commented, flicking his own ear as emphasis to the scratching part. 5 minutes later, the mission room was where lower-ranked missions as well as missions that had been deemed suitable for public knowledge were disturbed. As always, there was about 6 ninjas processing requests, mission fees, and intel that could prove valuable to the given mission. And since it was the early afternoon, the Hokage was also there to assist in handing out the missions. Currently Team 7 was waiting for their pay as well as their next mission, and in the meantime they were catching a very sad show. Wow, nice call, Sasuke grumbled as he saw the cat be subjected to the malicious torment of Lady Shijimi, the daimyo's wife. Oh my pretty kitty, Mom is so glad to have you back in her arms. Such a poor little kitty you are, Tora. Getting lost like that, but there's no need to worry, you're safe and sound with Mama now. Lady Shijimi cooed as she proceeded to strangle the poor cat. The room just stared as she wandered off, the slowly dying cat still in her arms. Alright, the Hokage announced, gaining the attention of the team gathered. Your next assignment will be to babysit for the Council of Elders. Run errands to the neighboring village of Ikasumi, Indigo Mist, digging up sweet potatoes. Sarutobi listed as he read over the list of jobs still available. Stop right there, old man, Naruto grumbled. I did not sign up to be an errand boy, I signed up to be a ninja. Give us a real fucking mission for Izanagi's sake. He finished, crossing his arms and throwing in a disgruntled glare. His team agreed with him, all with the exception of their teacher Kakashi, who just sighed at his failure to bring his students into line. Naruto! Iruka shouted, his head turning red and seemingly inflated. You're only a beginner and this grunt work is where you will get all your experience so you can do the bigger and better things. So that 3 months of grueling training Kakashi put us through was all for nothing. I'm not going to be a better ninja by looking after a bunch of brats. Threw me into the fucking fire already and watch me take it down. Naruto ranted as he threw his fists and elbows around haphazardly. Kakashi smacked the young shinobi over the head, getting his attention and warning him to step back into line. Sarutobi just sighed, and knew that the ram-headed Naruto would need a little explanation if he ever wanted this issue dropped. Naruto, we receive requests for missions daily. Ones that are deemed fit for public knowledge aren't sent here. Thoughts that aren't are handled through my office directly. Sarutobi began, saying maybe a bit too much, but he felt it was necessary. Public assignments go from D to a rank, and are distributed by rank, Ds and Cs to Genin, Cs and Bs to Archunin, and Bs and As to the elite. If the mission is complete, then payment is distributed to the ninja in question after their mission quota is complete, or they are put on inactive duty. Sarutobi explained as he grabbed the D-rank mission scroll. Since you have only recently attained the lowest rank, the best you can hope for are these D-rank missions. Sarutobi finished, placing the scroll down with a sense of satisfaction from his explanation. Naruto had paid no attention to the lecture and was instead more interested in his next meal. I had pork ramen yesterday, so I guess I'll have miso. You know what, I actually feel like getting something else. Mix it up a little. What about yakitori? That sounds like it could be worth a try. Naruto ranted to himself, much to the ire of the Hokage. Kakashi was almost considering groveling for the sheer amount of gall Naruto had to talk to the Hokage like he did. Of course the two were on good terms, but this was a professional setting of a military organization. Kakashi could end up taking the blow for not teaching his subordinates the terms of insubordination, something that he had already tried to beat into the team. Luckily, instead of the angry shout or red-faced, Sarutobi began laughing. Apparently something Naruto had said really connected with him. Lucky thing too, cause if Kakashi was going down, so was Naruto. I've heard that you cooled your temper, but I see it hasn't done a thing to your boisterous ways. Very well. We recently got in a contract for a mid-level C-rank mission for guarded escort to the Land of Waves, Sarutobi said as his laughter quelled. Team 7 seemed to rejoice at the prospect for not only getting a better mission but also the opportunity to leave the village walls. Naruto was especially ecstatic. Really? He said, his voice rising in excitement. Who is it? A princess, a lord, a traveling monk who is an expert in all forms of combat but cannot act because of a vow of pacifism. Naruto began, listing off any possibility that came to mind. No, Sarutobi began as he scooted his chair back, he's an architect. And not just any architect, came a slurred and drunken call, the super bridge builder Tazuna. Spirits. Naruto couldn't sleep, he was just too excited. In the morning he would meet up with the team outside the West Gate and begin his first mission. However, his excitement was causing some troubles. Naruto, come to bed already? A sleepy and irritated spirit groaned. Just go to sleep without me. I need to make sure I'm ready for tomorrow, Naruto explained as he checked over the stuff he would be putting in his pack. Tomorrow? Konoha asked as she zipped over to Naruto's side. What's going on tomorrow that's so important? The bubbly spirit began asking as she used her astral form to reach into Naruto's closed bag. Naruto managed to pull the unnecessarily distraught woman off him to explain. I'll be leaving for a few months to go to the Land of Waves and guard this old drunk. I'll be back soon. Wait, you're leaving the Land of Fire? A worried look soon replaced the one of depression on the spirit's face. What of it? I am a ninja after all. It's to be expected that I'm going to be traveling a lot, Naruto said as he pulled the spirit's hand out of his bag. But if you leave the Land of Fire, I can't watch over you, Konoha said as she moved to leave the room, and if one of my sisters gets a hold of you. She trailed off, but Naruto heard her and cut her off before she could leave. Naruto looked up from his task of packing and looked Konoha dead in the eye. Sisters? I didn't know you had sisters. Are they other forests or? Naruto asked, only to stop at the somber expression that told him to go no further. No, technically I am the kami for the Land of Fire, but I was born the spirit of the surrounding forests. When the shinobi clans began settling in, many spirits were born or took on new responsibilities, and for a short time there were hundreds of us and we were a family, until the first great shinobi war, that is. During that time many fledgling nations were cut down and absorbed into the other nations. The spirits either faded away or were stripped of power. We came to hate each other, and I came to hate the mantle I was given as kami of the Land of Fire, because it stripped me of my family. All my remained siblings hate me, and in turn our people hate each other, including my 4 sisters. Konoha explained as she slumped to the floor. I just wish things could return to the way they were, but I know that can never happen. Konoha just sat there staring off into space with a forlorn look in her eyes. Naruto sighed and lifted the spirit from the ground and placed her in his bed. Her eyes still stuck in a forlorn stare, not bothering to break away from the depressing thoughts that kept her stuck like that, gazed up at the young man who had allowed her into his home and accepted her and all her quirks as a spirit. He just stared back, his gaze somber but lined with his great will and a promise. I swear, Konoha, I'll find a way to end this, all the fighting, even if only for a moment, so you can finally see your family again. You have my word as a man. As a shinobi of Konohagakure, it will be done. Someday, Naruto returned, making the spirit look upward in awe as he placed her down on the bed and left. The kami sat up on the bed and looked out the door, her eyes welling up. He may only be able to see into our realm, but it felt like, for a second, that no, it's not possible, not yet. Spirit. Naruto came running up to the gate around 800 hours, his face twisted into one of pure excitement and anticipation. In fact, he was so excited that his face even refused to move an inch, keeping the poor boy from blinking. Tears streamed down his face from how dry his eyes were. All in all, it was probably just another day for Naruto Uzumaki. However, his face did earn him some odd looks from his teammates. "Naruto," Sasuke said, getting his teammates' attention, "what the hell is up with your face, and are you crying?" "No you ass, I'm just so excited I can't move my face," Naruto shouted back through clenched teeth. "I can't blink either, so my eyes are watering to try and keep them moist." Sasuke just sated before his palm slammed against his face in just pure embarrassment. "You know, if anyone else had said that, I would think they were lying." "Yeah, so knock it off," Sakura said as she drove her fist into the boy's skull, making his face flap about and snap out of its rigid stat. "It's giving me the creeps." Kakashi and old man Tazuna just stared at the exchange with a confused and frightened look on their faces. They shared a sigh and turned away, walking down the path wordlessly to head to Wave, their absence prompting the three strange teens to go after them and begin their journey to Wave. However, along the way, between the petty arguments and the awkward silence afterwards, Sakura's curiosity got the better of her. "Mr. Tazuna?" Sakura said as she picked up her step to match the pace of the bridge builder walking by Kakashi's side. "Yes." The drunken old man groaned as he sipped his sake, begging that the headache that would soon come up would be brief. "Well, why did you come to Konoha to hire ninja? I mean, surely Kiri would have been closer and easier to reach considering Wave's importance as a shipping hub. And while Wave does have a formal military working for it, daimyo, and they do take missions like ninja," Sakura said as she listed out reason after reason that Tazuna had more options than just Konoha. "Allow me to explain, Sakura," Kakashi offered, taking his role of sensei seriously for a few seconds. "While hiring members of the military would be easier, it would also be more expensive since they are a government branch. Konoha is cheaper because not only does it receive resources from the daimyo, but has its own economic system generating funds as well as many clients, allowing us to give private contracts cheaper. As for Kiri, it's currently in the middle of a massive civil war, with the rebel currently winning, so it's practically impossible for Kiri to accept any missions." Kakashi finished as Sakura scribbled these things down in her notepad. In fact, it's rumored that numerous missing nin from Kiri actually fund the rebellion in exchange for pardons on crimes committed against Kiri during the current regime. Kakashi added as a fun little tidbit. "Yeah, cheaper," Tazuna mumbled. Luckily, the comment was ignored by the team of ninjas as the grumblings of an old grumpy drunk. As the crew continued their walk, enraptured by conversation, they passed by a stray puddle. While Naruto and Sakura paid no mind to it, Kakashi was alarmed, while Sasuke merely eyed them with suspicion. As Kakashi took the final steps past the boundaries, a man suddenly leapt from the puddle, with another strapped to his back. With a powerful leap, the other man flew into the air, and the duo began to whip the serrated chain connecting the two of them. The loops fell over Kakashi and his second landed, and they both pulled, tightening the binds until they sliced through Kakashi, sending pieces of his body flying in all directions. "Sensei," Naruto said in shocked awe as he stared blankly ahead. "Two down," a low grunting voice whispered from behind him, shocking him. Luckily, Naruto's Muay Thai training had given him a small zone of hyper-reaction. As the clawed duo swiped at him from behind, Naruto ducked and leaned back. When he extended, he had limbo under the chain and their claws. Grabbing their heads to brace himself, he continued to slide back and slammed the two heads together. As Naruto continued his backpedal, Sasuke took the distraction to in the chain to a nearby tree. The duos tried to pursue Naruto but were held back by the shuriken and kunai that had pinned them to the tree. Naruto changed course and started running forward and struck the one with one horn with a knee, kicked him back and stepped on him to pin him down. "Stay down," Naruto growled as a shadow passed over him. "You should really watch your back, kid," the dual-horned assassin responded as his claws descended. Naruto suddenly froze, unable to act, with pure fear freezing him as he saw his own reflection in the bladed hands. Briefly, Sasuke had sailed overhead with a flying kick and nailed the assassin in the forehead. "Take your own advice," Sasuke said, going into a roundhouse kick and knocking the second brother out. "Thanks for the save," Naruto said, using a stomp to the head to knock out the other brother. "Don't mention it," Sasuke said as he broke the chain connecting the duo and began using it to bind them to the tree. "Good work you two," came a familiar voice. "Kakashi-sensei?" came Sakura's shocked gasp. "You must have used Kawarimi no Jutsu the second they tried to tighten the binds, right?" She stated more than asked as she examined Kakashi's arms for any cuts that might indicate when he used the technique. "Yes, I did it in order to figure out who they were after," Kakashi explained. "I knew something was up the moment I saw the puddle, so decided to let you guys handle this one and only jump in should one of you need me. And you all did fine," Kakashi said as he turned to Sasuke. "I'm especially proud of you, Sasuke. While Naruto and Sakura froze after my fall, you sprang into action. Naruto only managed to more damage cause he was targeted first and reacted accordingly when they got close." Naruto growled in the background while Sasuke smirked and handed the chain off to Sakura, who then approached the unconscious assailants. "I think I can get some info out of them. But I need some wire to bind them," Sakura said as she looked up at her sensei in hopes that he had the supplies. "Just use their serrated chain, it will keep them from squirming, and remove the gauntlets," Kakashi ordered. Sakura nodded and got to work binding the assassins with the chain and tossing their gauntlets to Sasuke, who eyed them with glee before attaching them to his belt. Sakura then smirked as she placed her bag on the ground and began shifting through the various items that she had packed into their bag. She pulled out a large tackle box and began to chuckle menacing as she opened it up and began to remove several things, one of them being a little salt shaker and a set of pliers. Sakura approached the unconscious duo with her plethora of tools and began to mumble. "Prep for interrogation. Step 1. Remove any weapons and equipment that could hinder investigation," Sakura said as she carefully removed the gas masks and horned face plate to check their mouths and keep their heads from being weapons themselves. "Step 2. Finish preparations for targets to suit means of interrogation," she again mumbled as she put down the pliers and grabbed the salt shaker and began waving them underneath the assassins' noses. "Ga where? What? Who are you?" one of the WTO began to mumble, moving slightly and making the chains cut into his being. "I'm unimportant," Sakura said, a light-hearted smile on her face. "All you need to know is that I'll be taking your secrets," she responded, holding up several of her tools, which included a scalpel, a long piece of wire threaded to a needle, and a feather. Her menacing laugh as she went through her bag of tricks were so disturbing Kakashi disturbed earplugs amongst the few watching the display. On the misty waters surrounding Wave Team 7, Tazuna, and a man simply as the rower, a fairly decent man who made his money smuggling people in and out of Wave under the tyranny of Gato, as they quietly drifted along on the current, to remain as silent as possible. However, the group was not as silent as they could have been. Naruto was overreacting to the sight of the bridge and Sakura kept shouting at him to calm down so they could do one last debriefing before hitting land. A single thwack echoed across the water as Sakura rammed the binding of her notebook into Naruto's skull. "Pay attention, loudmouth, I've got all the information from the interrogation ready and I'm only going to say this once," Sakura growled as she grabbed a pair of reading glasses from her pocket and placed them on her head. Naruto settled down and shut up, for fear of another hit from Sakura's notebook, which was filled with papers containing her notes on everything from integration to field-ready recipes for chicken, all of which made the book very heavy. It was almost strange, while he had been forcefully shoved down a path of spirituality. It seemed Sakura had started down the path to power through wisdom, as opposed to Sasuke's choice of embracing might as his answer. Naruto merely thought of it as things going their natural course, him excluded due to his unintended divine intervention. "So this is everything I got." According to various public reports, Gato moved his company's headquarters to Wave about 3 to 5 years ago, at which time immigration became so tight nobody has legally entered or left within that time. This could explain why we are the first outsiders to hear any of this despite how big the issue is, Sakura explained as she pulled out various newspaper clippings before stuffing them back into her notebook. "Now based on information given to us by the Demon Brothers and Tazuna we can figure out our situation. Gato has massive economic control of Wave and uses it as a base, along with his new corporate headquarters, to run his numerous black market deals with drugs, stolen goods or slaves he had shanghaied off the mainland, all of which are maintained by an army of thugs that he hires off the books. All of these projects and employees are funded by Wave, allowing Gato shipping and his black market to remain afloat without any missing dollars from either one," Sakura explained before smiling smugly and snapping the book close. Kakashi gave his little eye smile and patted the young woman on the head as congratulations. Very good, Sakura. He applauded. I recognize the use of the Morino method in your torture style and presentation. I take it you read the book recently? Kakashi asked, making Sakura nod and blushed, being a little embarrassed by the praise. The Morino method? Sasuke grumbled out as he looked at Kakashi for an answer. Yes, the Morino method, named after Ibiki Morino, the youngest head of the TDI department in history. Kakashi explained, you see, Ibiki is so good he wrote several guidelines to proper torture in the field and set the basic principles that the Konoha Anbu uses to today, which are easily healed but slow and painful scarring while using materials experienced any ninja would have on them. It's considered required reading for anyone entering the Anbu, Kakashi explained before being hushed by the rower. We approaching the town, remain calm and act casual, we don't need any attention, he said before spotting the drop point. He then dipped the paddle into the water and used it to maneuver them to the dock by sticking it in the ground below and holding it still, forcing the currents to drag the boat in. Everyone then climbed off the boat as the rower switched back on his engine, grabbed the fishing pole stashed under the seats and speed off, all his equipment ready as a cover story should he be caught on his trip back. Tazuna watched the departure with worry before whipping his brow clean of nervous sweat. It's going to be a bit of a walk to my place, we'll go around the city for now. If Gato gets wind of a group of newcomers this won't last long, Tazuna explained in his drunken grumble. The group wordlessly nodded and followed Tazuna out of the small fishing village, each of them grumbling about something or another. Kakashi was brooding about the impending attack that his years of experience had taught him to expect, while Sakura obsessed over a detail that she was missing in her notebooks in an attempt to fix the oversight. Naruto and Sasuke, however, were playing rock-paper-scissors, continuing a long rivalry of games that had started in between breaks of Kakashi's tortuous workout regimen. I win again, Sasuke said with a smug, yet bored look. I'm telling you, it's impossible to beat an Uchiha at this game. My father used it to train muscle prediction in me, and his father did the same, he explained as he pocketed his hand again, using his glare to signal the end of their little game. Naruto shook his fists in frustration as he wobbled away from his rival in anger, mumbling his swears and curses at Sasuke, as well as vague threats that made no sense. However, as he mumbled, he pulled ahead of the group. To make sure no one heard him, he began to hear things. The wind picked up a bit, a light whistling began which turned into the wispy voice of a woman, chanting cryptically. At the end of it all, the reject stood tall upon his fallen foes, once his comrades they were. All childhood gone at that point, given a blade to fill the void, it drinks deeply of life's red elixir, growing stronger from the morbid drink. As time brings it to its knees only for it to rise again. The voice vanished completely, but not before Naruto threw a kunai arbitrarily, or at least where he assumed the omnipresent voice was actually coming from. The only thing Naruto could do was stare and think back. What was that? He mumbled in a confused tone. The whispering then returned stronger than ever, coming from all directions, straining his ears, making them light up in a burning pain. A great hero he once was, and still is to become, the darker half's return masks the rise of he who holds his greatest gift. Naruto tried to follow the voice, but it just kept leaping around. She drinks deeply of the well of knowledge, in efforts to make herself strong. She will succeed, but not before a great loss. She stands silently and giggles. Their echoes carry secrets to those who elude the fog. He tries to forget with strong drink the memories of two lost sons. They did not belong to him but to his daughter who mourns them nightly. Son, grandson and nephew to the murdered, brother to their killer. He seeks justice but should be weary lest it consumes him. The fog is lifted, but a great darkness still obscures him. His first rise will come soon. A cloak of deception and a kind heart mark this young one and hide everything, including the base of his identity. Naruto kept trying to find the voice only to be led in circles, his last sight being a long-haired woman in a white dress standing out on the lake that suddenly disappeared. Uzumaki, Kakashi nearly shouted in his stern commanding officer voice. What is going on? We've been trying to get you attention for 3 minutes now. What's with the kunai? You almost killed a rabbit. Why? Kakashi said as he swung the rabbit in front of Naruto's face. I heard something and I reacted, but I think it might have been in my head, Naruto explained, his voice growing weaker as the explanation went on. Kakashi just started to shake his head, to distract by the oddities of Naruto to notice anything wrong with the rabbit. However, Sakura, in her fascination with anything fluffy, began to dote over the rabbit and was trying to find out as much as she could about it, even going as far as to pore over one of her wildlife books. As she read, her brow furrowed in confusion as she simply stared at the snowy white rabbit, before her eyes went wide and she dived down. "Everyone down now!" Sakura shouted, diving to the ground and grabbing the rabbit, with Kakashi getting Naruto and Sasuke taking care of Tazuna. As everyone fell to the ground, a massive blade passed overhead, a whirring sound following it before it collided with a tree. However, the blade was not alone. On its handle stood a massive giant of a man, whose arms were probably as long as the sword's handle itself. Naruto just looked up at the man and shuddered as he saw the blade repeating the cryptic words unconsciously. At the end of it all, the reject stood tall upon his fallen foes, once his comrades they were. All childhood gone at that point, given a blade to fill the void, it drinks deeply of life's red elixir, growing stronger from the morbid drink, as time brings it to its knees only for it to rise again, he said as he just stared in awe, unaware of his own words. The giant's eyes went wide before narrowing again, a grin coming through the binds across his mouth. "So it seems my reputation precedes me, and Blondie there has a talent for poetry it seems," the man commented. "I have to remember to write that down. I thinks it sums up me up pretty well, I think," he commented before turning around and facing the group. "Zabuza, the demon of the mist," Kakashi said as he slowly reached up and grabbed his headband, moving it up to reveal a scared eyelid, which covered a mysterious red eye with 3 black tomos circling the pupil. "Copycat Kakashi, how funny, the once feared shinobi reduced to a glorified babysitter." The man now known as Zabuza began to laugh darkly. "Not even your little Sharingan eye can help you now." An echo of familiarity passed over the group, affecting them all in various ways. While Naruto had only heard of it in passing, and Sakura having read into the topic only lightly, for the moment, Sasuke was well aware of what the Sharingan was, as it was his birthright as an Uchiha. However, there was little talk of the Sharingan and more about Kakashi's reputation, including his supposed knowledge of over 1,000 jutsu, and then a small exposition on Zabuza's slaughter of an entire generation of prospective ninja when he was rejected from the academy as a boy and his former standing in the ranks of Kiri. Naruto began to grind his teeth, as well as Sasuke, as the two listened to the explanatory rants. Sakura paid it no mind and used it as an opportunity to learn more. Finally Naruto snapped, "By Inari. What the fuck is wrong with you guys? Is all elite ninja do is shoot rank and achievements back and forth trying to one-up the other or something?" he shouted. Zabuza began to chuckle. "You're right." The blade and Zabuza disappeared in the blink of an eye. A simple ring of smoke signaling his arrival over the water. Blade now on his back. Enough talk, time for action. A mist then began to quickly roll in. It was so thick one couldn't even see the ground beneath their feet. At that point, for Team 7 and Tazuna, the world became a white void. Kakashi sighed as he prepared the team's battle plan in his head. "Zabuza will come for me first and is an expert in silent killing, so you guys won't know when he gets me, or if he gets me at all," Kakashi explained as he formulated an attack plan as he surveyed the clearing through the mist. "I will be able to hold him off, but I don't know for how long, so as soon as you hear a struggle, run with Tazuna and protect him with your life." The order only seemed to provoke the genius killer, because as soon as Kakashi finished, a dark laughter cut through the mist with its twisted message. It was a list. It sent shivers down their spine, especially when Zabuza repeated it. "There are 8 points: the heart, the lungs, the throat, the kidneys, the spine, the liver, the jugular vein and the subclavian artery, so many choices." In an instant the moral was gone, replaced by a foreboding fear that tried to grip them all in its tight grip. And for all the power he now held, Sasuke was helpless, the killing intent that saturated the air dragging him back to that fateful day. It brought Sasuke to his knees. It even forced him to bring his kunai up and turn it on himself. He would have acted to if it weren't for the words of Kakashi, who vowed to protect them from anything. It calmed Sasuke only a little, but the calmness was torn asunder when a voice whispered between them all. "It's over." Naruto lashed out, Zabuza's close proximity and surprise appearance triggering a response that Kakashi had beaten into him. A descending elbow with the left into Zabuza's back followed by a hawk punch to the head. Naruto then tumbled into a puddle of water confused. His fist had made contact but its target was now gone. He's using Mizu Bushin. Kakashi warned as realization hit him before a swish echoed through the trees. Zabuza's blade passing through him. Water scattered across the field in the swing of Zabuza's blade, shocking the giant man as he stared at the spot his opponent had been mere moments before. "You copied me through this mist?" His shock was evident and enhanced by the man he just attempted to kill, Kakashi, standing behind him, a knife to his neck. "Yes, and you little game is over." Kakashi swiftly shoved the blade into Zabuza's throat, only to have to be coated with water and have a blade poised at his throat much like he was doing mere seconds ago. "No, it's only just beginning, Kakashi." Zabuza began to chuckle, firmly holding the blade in his hand against Kakashi's throat while positioning his sword in the other. "You greatly underestimate me. I'm no fool," he mumbled, just loud enough for Kakashi to hear before his arm twitched and the massive blade moved. Kakashi reacted and tried to pivot, only to duck under the massive blade, ruining his attack. Zabuza then switched hands holding the sword, ditching the knife and spinning around again. However, Kakashi made sure that the rotation would be incomplete by swiping at the assassin's legs, which with the massive sword flying off in another direction knocked Zabuza off his feet. Zabuza quickly recovered through and moved to throw his sword while Kakashi was still in the air, but was blocked by a field of caltrops, forcing him to stop so that his feet would not be filled with holes. Kakashi soon landed in the lake and struggled to surface and stay afloat, as if the water weighed him down. A dark chuckle came from behind him that instant. "Suiro no Jutsu," Zabuza said as the water rose up from the lake and began to warp around Kakashi in an inescapable bubble of water. Zabuza began to chuckle darkly. "Sorry Kakashi, but you're too much of a nuisance to deal with directly. Luckily I can just keep you in there till you run out of air, and with your adrenaline now pumping hard after that little scuffle you're going to burn through it fast and leave yourself a sitting duck," Zabuza foretold grimly as he turned his attention to the shore. "Now it's time for your little brats and the old man to say goodbye." Mizu Bushin no Jutsu. Another Zabuza began to rise from the water, first taking shape then gaining color. The clone walked onto the shore, mocking Team 7 about their age and inexperience and starting off its attack by striking the one who was able to destroy the first clone, Naruto. He went flying back, his headband falling off in the process, and skid across the ground unsettling the dust. Sakura began combing through her notebook she had filled with just you and pulled out information she had on the Mizu Bushin Jutsu. Naruto, Sasuke, the Mizu Bushin only replicates a tenth of the user's true ability and cannot venture far from him. We should be able to outrun. We need to take Tazuna and go now," Sakura shouted, taking command of the situation as she tried to put all of the pieces in place straight in her head. Yes, listen to Sakura and leave. He can't move while maintaining the Suiro or he'll risk freeing me, which he is trying to prevent. You've got 30 minutes at most, that should be enough to lose him. Go now," Kakashi shouted through the bubble, making Zabuza chuckle again. Naruto on the other hand was seeing red. Zabuza had taken his headband from him and was stepping on it, one of his most prized treasures, one of the few gifts he had ever received. Naruto slowly stood up and began stepping forward, the strap sandals snapping off as they frayed apart from abuse, leaving Naruto barefoot. The dust billowed with each step and Naruto boiled over. He went into a charge, intent on somehow plowing the ninja down. Then he saw the blade. Zabuza's clone drew the sword and swung, intent on splitting the poor boy right in half down the middle. Naruto, however, countered by sidestepping the down slash and started what looked like a rolling mess of elbows and punches down the flat edge of the blade, leading up to a final strike to the face. "Rolling combo," Naruto bellowed. He was thrown back before the final hit could be landed, but the clone blade dissolved into water as he fell. Naruto smirked as he plucked the headband out from between his toes and wrapped it back around his head. "Took out the sword and got back my headband. I think things are looking up." Naruto stood up proudly and began bouncing on the balls of his feet. "I know you have a plan now, Sakura," Naruto said as he began taking deep breaths and shaking his arms. Sakura watched him carefully as she witnessed the sporadic movement become almost rhythmic and smirked. "I do now. You go ahead and take lead. Sasuke, you back him up and strike hard and fast whenever possible. I'll support from here while guarding Tazuna. When you were the clone down, you two regroup to me. If I'm right, the clone's recovery time is 10 times longer than the real Zabuza's and should give us the time we need to plan step 2. Sakura explained as she began preparing the slingshot armed with caltrops. Already on it, Sasuke grunted as he leapt forward, leaving Sakura alone to guard the old man alone. Just going to try and plow me down, real original kid, Zabuza mocked as he slid into a fighting stance. In recent weeks, Naruto and Sasuke had been sparring non-stop, forcing the evolution of their fighting styles. While Naruto learned to be reactive as well as how to string combos from single hard hits, Sasuke learned how to make his hits harder without much effort and how to mislead during an attack. This is what ultimately befell Zabuza's clone. Sasuke charged forward but stopped with a skid, slowly moving into clone Zabuza's strike zone. Sasuke moved for a straight punch straight to the head, but it was knocked upward. The clone smirked, thinking it had beaten the attack, but was surprised when the hand he knocked up and away then grabbed his head when he bent down to strike. Clone Z then found his head being driven into Sasuke's knee before being straightened out by a flip kick that knocked his chin up and sent stumbling back by a spear tackle like Ram. Luckily, the clone knocked Sasuke away into the caltrops placed by Kakashi, which the boy narrowly avoided and only got out of them with help from Sakura. In all the commotion caused by Sasuke, the clone had all but forgotten about Naruto, who was now charging in with his own attack. The clone sighed and prepared itself again for another pointless fist fight and was surprised when he saw the brat pick up speed and sock him in the stomach. Naruto smirked. "That's my newest technique, Battle Meditation Mantra 1. Meditation upon movement," Naruto announced as he bent out of the way of clone Zabuza's next strike and moved into a sweep. However, the clone caught on to Naruto's increased ability and adjusted himself accordingly. "You kids are like flies," Zabuza's clone growled as he leapt over the sweep, landed and punched Naruto, sending him back, but began yelling when something splashed in his face. "I've got the next step already, guys. Catch," Naruto shouted as he reached into his pack and suddenly whipped his arm out, throwing whatever it was he grabbed to Sasuke. Sasuke caught the object, eyes widening when he saw what it was. Sasuke smirked and rolled, shifting his grip so the object would fan out. Demon Windmill Shuriken. With a chakra-enhanced leap, Sasuke took to the sky and threw the giant shuriken. "Windmill of the Shadows," he announced as he fell to the ground, still smirking. "A simple shuriken, really?" the real Zabuza questioned, as he continued to hold up the water prison. "At least you had the sense to target me, but it's still pointless." Zabuza used his free arm and plucked the shuriken out of the air, chuckling until he saw the second shuriken. If Zabuza had eyebrows, they would have shot up past the hairline, a second in the shadow of the first. "When did he?" Zabuza didn't have time to finish he questioned. He jumped over the blade to avoid it without moving. Zabuza just glared at the three on the shore and reared back his free arm to throw the shuriken. Then he heard a sound from behind him. "Think fast," Naruto shouted as he sailed over the water. Zabuza turned his head and once again went wide-eyed as the kunai sailed for his head. Zabuza released the technique and dodged the blade, but was too stiff from holding the water sphere and couldn't move fast enough. The blade grazed right over Zabuza's cheek, leaving a deep cut right below the eye. "You little brat," Zabuza shouted, enraged that a rookie could hit him easily. He spun around to throw the shuriken but was stopped by the now free Kakashi, which was using the metal plates on his glove to hold back the windmill. Zabuza scoffed, his eyes still burning with rage. "So you made me fly into a rage to unravel the spell. Doesn't matter, that rage will only help me kill you faster." Zabuza literally growled as the water clone on the shore fell apart. "No, your jutsu was broken from the outside by those rookies," Kakashi stated, still holding the blade back steadily. "And so you know the same trick won't work twice." Kakashi finished knocking back the blade. Zabuza distanced himself and began a set of hand seals. Kakashi instantly did the same, matching Zabuza seal for seal. "Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu." Two dragons then rose out of the water and coiled it around each other before crashing, causing a massive explosion that unsettled the lake. Meanwhile, on shore, Naruto was watching the fight between two elites enthralled. However, something diverted his attention, the woman from earlier who had disappeared. "They ravage my lake, unsettle my waters. It causes me such pain." This time her whisperings were much less cryptic and more like cries for help. Naruto was genuinely confused when he heard the spirit call out in pain, considering nothing was happening to her. That spirit must be deeply tied to this lake for whatever reason, Naruto said as he turned his attention away from the troubled spirit he could not help and back to the conflicts of the elite. Again both of them had begun the same technique, but then Zabuza began to slow down. Kakashi finished his technique first and called it out. Zabuza went wide-eyed in realization. Sweden. Daibakufu no Jutsu. Kakashi called out, sending the hapless Zabuza into a tree, cracking several of his ribs. You can see the future? Zabuza asked in a pain-induced light-headed feeling. I foresee your death, Kakashi stated calmly as he walked forward on unsteady feet. He then stopped when a flurry of senbon embedded themselves in Zabuza's neck. Well, your prediction came true, came an amused and feminine voice from the trees. It was a girl only about 2 years older than Team 7 wearing a strange reinforced porcelain mask. Based on your mask you're a hunter nin from Kiri, right? Kakashi said as he looked up to the trees. Yes, the hunter nin responded as she appeared down to the fallen Zabuza's side. I would have let you finish him but I've been tracking him for days and wanted the satisfaction myself, she stated as she began to heft the body up and onto her shoulder. I'm afraid I must take my leave and dispose of this body. Just as quickly as she had gotten there the woman disappeared leaving the team in awkward silence. Tazuna then began laughing. Well, that was an amazing display. Too bad you kids got your butts handed to you, he said laughing and grabbing a bottle of sake from his belt. Well, come on. You can lick your wounds and nurse your wounded prides back to health, he added with a chuckle only to be interrupted by the sound of Kakashi falling over. Crap, sensei passed out from chakra exhaustion. Naruto, Sasuke, get over here and carry Kakashi back to Tazuna's, Sakura demanded as she checked the fallen body of Kakashi. You guys go one ahead, Naruto shot back. I'll catch up real quick. I just have to do something first, he told them. The team left, not pressing the issue much further knowing that Naruto would be quick. Naruto walked over to the lake's edge and pulled out a small wooden stake carving attached to a wooden bowl. He stuck it in the ground and pulled out a small vial of a glowing purple liquid and emptied the vial into the bowl. He then grabbed 2 incense candles and dropped them in the bowl before lighting them. I'm sorry they caused you such pain, he said calmly before rising from the ground and leaving, allowing the lake to take the small bowl and marker. Out on the lake the spirit smiled in appreciation of the apology given by one of the people who had caused her turmoil. A foggy darkness surrounded him, draining him of all his energy. Kakashi groaned as he tried to trash out his limbs and move through the mist but it was pointless. Suddenly a cold damp feeling on his forehead caught his attention. The darkness began to clear, light beaming through a crack slowly widening. With another groan Kakashi then re-entered the world of the living and tried to sit up. He immediately regretted it as he suddenly was light-headed again and was forced to lay back down by a fairly pretty woman who was tending to him. Oh good, you awake? Your students asked me to tend to you while they treated any wounds they had. Are you feeling alright? The woman asked in confusion. Yes, I'm fine, just really exhausted. I think I may have strained my legs too. A week of good rest should fix that right up, Kakashi commented, reassuring the woman that he was alright. If you don't mind, could you fetch my students? We have important things to discuss, Kakashi said as he slowly sat back up sighing when he didn't feel the lightheadedness overtake him. If you don't mind me asking, about what, Mr. Shinobi? The pretty woman asked as she moved towards the door to fetch the team. Our friend Zabuza may not be as dead as we think, Kakashi said cryptically as he turned towards the window, glaring as if he could see Zabuza. Inari, first I'll remove the mask so I can let the blood drain out from the mouth, the young masked man said as he leaded forward, kunai in hand, ready to open the mask when a hand grabbed his wrist forcefully. I can do it myself, grunted a wounded Zabuza, who pried open the bandages and began spitting out blood and ripping senbon out of his neck. Master, stop that, you can really kill yourself if you're not careful, the boy replied worriedly as he watched his master, through the porcelain mask, remove the needles. Zabuza stopped and shot his assistant a dirty look. Take off that fucking mask, it gives me the creeps. Sorry sir, but it was all part of my ruse, the boy explained as he prepared Zabuza's wounds to be bandaged. They never suspected a thing, the boy smirked. Inari, so the hunter nin wasn't real? Sakura asked in a state of fright. She knew that if that monster with the clever was still alive then it could hunt them down. Not only that but Zabuza is still alive, The only question is whether he will leave from the defeat or again make an attempt on Tazuna's life," Kakashi said as he rubbed the back of his neck in pain. "If Zabuza does try again, we could be in trouble. It will take at least a week and a half for him to recover, so until then we're going to be training, starting tomorrow," Kakashi said with a yawn as he lied back down, groaning slightly as his muscles ached. Naruto and the rest of Team 7 left the room as soon as Kakashi lay down. All of them were mumbling something about the current situation, frustrated by Zabuza giving them the slip. Naruto, however, quickly snapped out of the funk when he realized something very important. He walked over to Tazuna's daughter and tapped on her shoulder. "Excuse Ms." Naruto said, only then realizing he did not know her name. "Tsunami," she stated with a slight smile that only a mother could have. "Right, Tsunami," Naruto affirmed. "Do you know of any shrines here in Wave, preferably close by?" Naruto questioned. Tsunami then looked puzzled, looking up to the ceiling, one arm on her hip, the other arm propping up her chin. "Well, I do remember something about shrine in town, but it was in a state of disrepair before Gato. It's probably the center of squatters' grounds now," she commented offhandedly. "Defiantly stay away from them. Some will do anything for money," she warned as she walked off to take care of the various things that needed to be done around the house. Naruto thanked Tsunami before she left and walked away himself, bumping into a kid about the age of 10. Naruto tried to apologize, but the kid simply glared, which would have meant nothing if the glare didn't seem so empty. "It's hopeless, going against Gato," he said, empty glare still present. Naruto did not like being talked down to and let his newfound calmness slip and allowed his voice to be driven by his emotion and bravado. "What did you say to me?" Naruto asked, hands trembling as they clenched into fists. "You heard me, it's hopeless," Inari repeated blandly. "You go against Gato, you die. Plain and simple," he finished, uncaring of any doubts he placed in Naruto's mind. "Listen, punk," Naruto started, jabbing his finger in Inari's face. "I don't give a flying fuck about what people think about themselves or anyone else, so you can shove this unstoppable bullshit up your ass while I go throw Gato off a bridge and into the ocean along with all of his hired goons," Naruto lashed out before storming away, mumbling about the temple. Inari just stood there silently in shock before going to his room to look at the ocean, like he had intended to do earlier. "Inari." Naruto rubbed his elbows furiously, attempting to get some weird gunk off himself and his clothing. It was the last time he would ever fight a swarm of angry squatters, but certainly not the last time he would insult them. Naruto also did not like the fact that the squatters had desecrated the shrines that populated the temple, especially since he could feel the anger the spirits held for the trespassers. Naruto had thrown the heathens, as some would put it, out of the temple and locked up its doors, which lightened the mood considerably, but Naruto knew that until the temple was cleaned and most of its stolen pieces returned, he would not feel any peace here. Naruto sighed as he grabbed a mop, brush and bucket and walked out into the courtyard, which had become a dump thanks to the squatters, to fetch some water. He returned moments later with filled buckets and a large tarp that he had found to remove the trash. Splashing some water on the floor, Naruto then took to his knees and began his humble acts of cleaning the spirits' home. He could feel the shock on the spirits' faces, but they still chose to hide themselves as many spirits did. Naruto smirked and continued his acts until the entire room was scrubbed clean. It didn't take as long as Naruto expected, but it was still pretty exhausting. "Now to find the offering plates," Naruto mumbled as he headed to the pile, sure that some dunce of a beggar had used the offering plates as bowls, or as a pan to cook his food. Sure enough, that was what had happened, the once pristine offering plates reduced to dirty bowls with food burned into them. Naruto scrubbed and polished them to the best of his ability, but he was only able to restore so much. It seemed to be the trick, though, as a warm and pleasant feeling seemed to begin wafting over the temple. Naruto smiled brightly as he felt his work influence the spirits' moods and spent the rest of the night cleaning out the courtyard of the shanty town that had taken place in the open space around the sacred bell, which was apparently missing. It took hours to get all of the trash out of the temple, but Naruto worked diligently and without complaint. For some reason, Naruto felt like he was being watched throughout the whole thing, but disregarded as the spirits, despite the fact that while hiding themselves they could not be sensed beyond the spiritual waves they sent out when near another being. Around dawn, Naruto finished his task of restoring the shrine to its former glory within the best of his abilities, The only things he could not do were replace the golden bell or the silk tapestries that were supposed to rest behind the offering plates and dictate which spirit you were praising. Feeling the energies of the spirit waft over him in thanks filled Naruto with glee and relived his body of its aches and pains from the long night of labors done in their name. Satisfied, Naruto prepared to leave by leaping out over the wall, as to keep squatters from violating the grounds once again. As he took a deep breath to focus his chakras, an act that he strained to do due to lack of sleep, he saw a figure peer at him and quickly disappear. Naruto grumbled, "Those damn godless squatters again." Naruto was soon compelled by the spirits to tail the figure, forcing him down the maze of halls that made up the temple's dormitories. The figure was small and surprisingly agile, and while Naruto tried to speed up, something was holding him back. It dashed into a room that was supposedly locked and leads Naruto right to where he needed to be. Swinging the door open, Naruto saw a family of squatters, a man and his wife and their little girl, who looked to be the one who had been running through the halls. "Please," the man begged, "we saw what you did to the others, we'll leave peacefully," he pleaded, grabbing various things in his hands while trying to back into the wall. Normally Naruto's brash attitude, even when calmed by an even temperament, would lash out and demand that the man leave now lest he invite more defilers into the shrine, but something strange happened to Naruto. A familiar yet new energy flooded his system, taking over his entire body and forcing it to do something extremely shocking. "Fear not, loyal ones, in your hour of need turn to prayer and praise the spirits endlessly, for this they will provide you with everything Godo has taken from you. This temple is your home now as well as the spirits, care for it and you shall never grow weary. Food will come to you and money will be no concern, all that is asked in return is your lives in servitude to the kami at this temple," the one possessing Naruto offered. "Yes, kind sage," the woman practically cried in joy. "Our lives in service for relative comfort." She trailed off into her own tears as Naruto was then walked out of the room by the spirit. The power soon left Naruto's body and then compelled him to leave. Naruto shook his head. "There's always something weird going on with the spirits," he mumbled as he leapt out of the courtyard to meet up with his team for training. Inari. It was late when Naruto got home from training that day. His work at the temple had put him back some in his schedule, so he arrived at Tazuna's house just as everyone was leaving to go start their training. Naruto stayed behind and ate breakfast and rushed off into the woods, tracking the team through his intuition, which had become charged with spiritual energies, increasing its divining powers. He arrived at practice with everyone waiting for him, including Kakashi, who was usually the one that people waited for. Then Naruto spent the rest of the day attempting to run up trees, still barefoot since Zabuza had destroyed his only pair of sandals. He would have stayed longer and tried to keep up with Sasuke, but the lack of sleep, and the prospect of not being raped in his sleep by Konoha, the kind and infatuated spirit of the land of fire, had drawn him to bed quite easily. Naruto opened up the door to the guest bedroom where Team 7 was currently bunking and was shocked by what he saw. Standing there was a large white fox. Black markings crisscrossed its body and 4 glowing tails extended outward, placing various items on the single dresser that stood in the room that it pulled from a fine red pouch that had been draped over its back like a saddle. It suddenly stopped and turned towards Naruto, a fox's grin appearing on the beast's face. "It's fine to meet you, young sage. The spirits have tasked me with delivering some messages and gifts for you to this mortal plane. I must go now, but I do hope to see you soon." The animal spoke in an eloquent tone of refinement not unlike one of royalty. Suddenly the fox wrapped its tails together, disguising the many as one, and leapt out the window. Naruto rushed to the fox's exit and was awed to see it running through the sky, shocks of light coming from its feet as it moved to the temple and vanished in a pillar of light. Naruto kept staring at the sky stars struck before turning back to the dresser and looking at the various things that had been left to him. The first object that stood out was the pile of letters, mostly because energy just seemed too wafted off them like they were formed and not written. Also because it was a fairly large pile of letters, but that was only secondary to the wafting energy. The next item was 2 sets of robes, both of them white with black pants, as well as a set of brown leather straps that appeared to be made to be worn on the legs to bind the pant leg down. Naruto examined the robes casually and found them to be made of a pseudo-silk that was, once again, crafted from spiritual energy. Naruto then moved onto the small sake gourd. Energy wafted from within every drop of the sake, and when turned over it simply kept pouring its contents out with no end in sight while still remaining full. A sip from the sake made a feeling of power rush over him, but also one of inebriation, though it was only minuscule. Naruto then moved on to the final gift, which was a necklace, much like his medallion but draped with jade mogtama. Grabbing his medallion, he unclasped it from the cheap chain that kept it around his neck and reattached it to the center of his necklace. Naruto then decided to read the letters, to get a clue of what was going on with the gifts and the glowing white fox. Opening the first letter of the stack of messages, Naruto could practically hear the awe-inspiring voice that called out through the air. To the faithful young sage. We, the spirits of the temple at Wave, thank you for your service in dealing with the men who defiled our home, a place of worship, as well as assisting us in the appointment of our new caretakers and our eventual high priestess. However, your tasks are not quite done yet, young sage, for there is still much to do to repair our once prosperous land. In our shrine rested a plethora of fine silk tapestry that dictated which shrine we owned and who was being praised. The thief has also stolen the golden bell which once proudly sat at the courtyard, only to be rung on the new year, to see out the old and usher in the new, or the death of one of the priests. They are still in the land of waves, we can feel it, and what is worse is that the thief seems to have the ability to bend spirits to his will. The end product is a spirit that has been stripped of everything, including their appearance. We have lost quite a few of our fellow kami in the past few years, and we fear that we may be next. Hunt down the dishonored kami on our behalf and free our breather. These are your tasks, young sage, and should you complete them all you will have our favor. When that has been gained, the Yoko that delivered these to you will send you our final message. Kami of Wave. Naruto read through the message in happiness, being glad that he was actually gaining favor of the kami that he faithfully served, even if it was only because he could see them and as such feared their power that much more. Looking at his clothes, which had been ruined during the fight with the dirty squatters who had turned the once respectable shrine into a dump, he decided that a change of clothes was in order, keeping his orange vest of course, since the outfit wouldn't be as awesome without it. Donning the outfit, Naruto used his headband as a belt like he had been doing for some time. Deciding that he couldn't risk losing his endless sake gourd, Naruto corked it and stuffed it into his vest pocket. Opening the window, he leapt out, determined to hunt down the unfortunate spirit that had been torn from everything it may have cared about. Naruto ended up leaping through the trees for a few hours, and even put his new tree climbing skill to use despite the fact that he had yet to fully get the hang of it. Naruto sighed as he looked up into the sky and saw the moon beginning to fall from its perch. Damn it! Got to sleep, Naruto mumbled as he turned right around and began his trek back to the house. As Naruto's figure faded from the area, a strange being slinked out from its hiding place. Long limbs and a flat face with no defining features, it was as if the being that stood in its place had been torn from reality and left only a blank canvas for which the universe to fill. It writhed and twisted, a gnarled scream echoing from its non-existent mouth. Truly it was a twisted being. Inari. After spending last night training, Kakashi had given Naruto the day off. This meant that Naruto was now walking through the streets acting as a guard for the bridge builder's daughter Tsunami. Their walk was very strange as the poverty-stricken streets of Wave seemed so very surreal, but Naruto could relate to a certain degree, given as how he had to earn the few things he had in his life, which was difficult when you don't seem to exist to other people. Tsunami talked most of the way, happy to have Naruto looking after her on her grocery trip instead of Sakura, who had originally volunteered. It was nothing personal against Sakura, but Tsunami felt safer with a man, given how run down and populated by criminals the city had become. Having someone imposing like Naruto lowered the chances of anyone actually trying anything significantly. There is so much sorrow here, Naruto commented as he surveyed the crowd. Yes, all the money is gone, almost all of it belongs to Gato, and he is making headway in draining it from the rest of this land, and pretty soon he'll have us all under his thumb, Tsunami said as she casually walked down the streets, having been desensitized to the suffering of her own home. If this continues, the people will turn to him for a solution, and selling ourselves will be the only way out, she finished sadly as she entered the grocery store, which was drastically understocked. Naruto looked around in a state of disbelief as his eyes slowly hardened into a glare. There was no doubt in his mind now that Gato was the thief that had first defiled the shrine to the Kami of Wave. He needed to be punished. This land needed to be set free. "Hey, there's that punk kid that threw us out of our squatting grounds." A guttural voice rang. A voice that was familiar to Naruto. Naruto simply glared. "That land was not yours, it belongs to the kami. It was their shrine," Naruto shouted back, his temper beginning to rise. "The kami have long abandoned Wave Kid," one of the squatters said as they approached him. "No, you abandoned them," Naruto shot back as he ducked under the first swing and socked the squatter in the stomach before grabbing his opponent's left arm, bracing himself and flipping the fool over his shoulder. "And don't think that you can beat me. I am a shinobi first and foremost, then a servant to the kami," he said darkly, allowing his anger to finally slip free of the binds that his frequent mediation had put on it. "The people here are getting worse with each day," mumbled the man behind the counter as he went about his day trying to sell what little wares he had left before he would be closed down. Naruto sighed in contempt as he looked out over the sea of desperate people. They were all under the foot of a tyrannical madman who was convinced he was above the law. Among these throngs of downtrodden were people who weren't even native, suffering along with them stuck on the island the second Gato seized control. Naruto felt a rage boil up but quickly squashed it down with deep breathing and the dispersing of the thoughts. However, no amount of meditation could truly banish his rage. The longer he stayed in Wave, the more distanced from his inner peace he felt. "Tsunami, let's go back to your home. I don't think the streets will be safe for much longer," Naruto lied as he grabbed Tsunami's free hand and began to guide her back to the dockhouse. Tsunami resisted at first but quickly stole a glance at the clock. Her eyes widened and she tucked the basket under her arm and pulled ahead of Naruto and started dragging him through the streets. People began to stare and soon looked up to the clocks themselves, and slowly a panic erupted onto the streets. Moments after the streets had been cleared and Naruto and Tsunami managed to get to the edge of town, Gato and his armed thugs began walking down the street, trashing anything that was still standing and cutting down anyone that got in their way. It was a regular display of power to the people of Wave, that they could only watch it happen. Inari. Dinner at Tazuna's house was a quiet affair with glares exchanged across the table by members of Team 7. A rivalry had erupted between the three of them over their progress with the tree climbing exercise, and among the three there was a competition. Currently there was a tie between Sakura and Naruto for first, and Sasuke was in last but quickly gaining. Naruto through his meditation was able to wrangle control of his chakras better and faster than anybody else, but he overloaded and undercharged frequently. Add in his service to the kami, and Naruto wasn't training as hard as Sasuke and Sakura were. Those two would throw themselves to the ground trying to get stronger. Sakura was doing better than Sasuke because she approached everything with a level head and an analytical mind and was able to get the right amount every time, but was having trouble maintaining the charge. Sasuke, however, was the opposite. He had no problem maintaining the charge but couldn't keep it steady and often slipped or got blown of the tree altogether. No matter what, all three of them returned exhausted and a little bit better. It wasn't long before the silence began to grate on Naruto's nerves. "Alright, let's just set aside our competition for right now and talk about something. I hate it when it's too quiet," Naruto yelled, ending with a grumble, letting some of his immaturity slip through. "You're right," Sakura said as she sighed, trying to think of something to discuss, since there were too many hot-button or generally obscure topics that would have only made things more awkward. Then she spotted it. "What's with that picture, the one with the person torn out?" she questioned as she got up from the table to pick the mentioned photo. "Oh, that was Inari's father, not his birthfather, mind you. He was a hero to this country," Tazuna commented solemnly as he drank deeply from his sake gourd. Inari suddenly shuddered and moved away from the table and left the room. Tsunami suddenly turned to her father with a protective glare and he sighed, knowing that he had blown it. He had to finish the story now though, despite any wrath his daughter could send his way. His name was Kaiza. He was a traveling fisherman seeking his fortune when he ended up in Wave. Ended up finding it too, and all of it is going to pay for the new bridge. He saved Inari from drowning, and from there the two became inseparable, and he slowly took over the role of a father to Inari and eventually got Gato's attention, Tazuna explained, taking another swig from his gourd. Naruto doing the same with his sacred sake gourd. He had saved this town from flooding a few years back and became a symbol of perseverance. Gato tied him up and removed his arms, used our symbol of perseverance as an example to squash any thoughts of rebellion. No one took that harder than Inari. Tazuna was about to take another swig when Naruto abruptly got up from the table. "Where are you going, kid?" he asked, a bit peeved that the kid was leaving during his story. "You said that Kaiza was a symbol of perseverance to the people of Wave. If that's true, then he could have ascended, like most mortal men who come to represent something do." Naruto explained as he stuffed his sake gourd into his pocket. "I'm going to go train and see if I can find a kami once known as Kaiza." Naruto stormed out of the kitchen and into the woods, leaving behind everyone else in shock. Everyone stared in silence at the door, unsure of what Naruto had just said. Kakashi then gathered his thoughts enough to comment, "I'm sorry, Naruto is a bit religious. It's a somewhat unexpected development too." No, it's alright," Tsunami commented with a sigh as she scooped some more rice for Sasuke, who had held out his bowl for a second helping. "Inari, Tazuna said that all of Kaiza's money went into building this bridge, and that he came here to seek his fortune. So there's a good chance of him being here," Naruto mumbled as he walked out onto the empty bridge to begin his search for the ascended spirit of Kaiza. As he walked on the bridge, the sound of the waves soon evolved into hushed whispers. That's when Naruto noticed it, the person on the ground. He picked up the pace and ran to his side, almost slipping in the blood that coated the ground around him. Naruto stopped before he kneeled, knowing to be pointless. He was also a little weirded out by stepping in someone's blood while barefoot. Then he heard it, hushed whispers from a couple of familiar voices. "Once we do this, Gato will owe us one," said one of the familiar voices. Naruto was then pulled into this conversation. Using his limited skills with the tree walking technique, Naruto began taking steps off the ledge, onto its side and then to the underside. There he saw the squatters that he had kicked out of the temple and had beaten in the streets, tying dynamite to the bridge's pillars. "Yeah, and then we can get our temple back from the preachy sage kid," the taller, lanky former squatter said, only to be scolded by the larger one. "We won't need the temple, we'll have riches and the sage kid will be dead," he grumbled as he continued to tie dynamite to the pillar. "Is that so?" Naruto quipped as he dropped down from the ceiling and crushed the two squatters. "You two are really grating on my nerves, you know that?" Naruto told them as he picked them up by their scraggy collars and threw them off the underside of the bridge and into the freezing waters below. "Don't bother coming back," Naruto mumbled as he removed the dynamite carefully and tossed it into the water below. Naruto continued unwiring the bridge and tossing the dynamite until every last bit was off and he was back on the right side. He then kicked the dead body overboard, feeling that its discovery would hinder the bridge's construction. A quick prayer and a request of forgiveness was all that it took to relieve Naruto's guilt, because he was as such a shinobi before anything else, which desensitized him to certain things in certain situations. Naruto then sighed and rose from his knees and turned to leave the bridge. His search for Kaiza would have to wait until he got a new person to guard the bridge that night. He was stopped, however, by a small hand that had grabbed his wrist. "Wait, mister, I didn't get to thank you," rang a high-pitched childish voice. Naruto turned around and saw a small little boy of about 4, with shaggy hair and a big smile. "You said earlier you're looking for Kaiza, right? Well, if you wait you can meet him. He's here every day at midnight," the young boy said, smiling with his small teeth, one of which was missing. He thought it over carefully and decided that he should wait with the mysterious young boy for a while. After all, it was just an hour till midnight and his team probably wasn't expecting him back for some time. "All right, I'll wait with you," Naruto said as he sat down, a small smile on his face as he tried to make small talk with his new friend. "So what's your name?" Naruto asked calmly as he looked up at the sky, waiting for midnight. "I don't have one yet. Until my bridge is named, I don't have a name," the boy said plainly, as if it was an everyday thing. "So you're a kami?" Naruto asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Not yet, but when this bridge is finished and named I will be," the boy said excitedly as he stepped awkwardly and hopped around, entertaining himself with funny little dances and whatnot. Naruto and the boy sat there for a couple of hours waiting for the spirit of Kaiza. Naruto yawned and looked up at the sky again. It was well past midnight and Kaiza's spirit had yet to show. The young spirit started pouting as he stared out onto the bridge's starting end. "Kaiza!" the young spirit shouted. "Where are you?" he called out as he slumped down. Naruto scratched the back of his head in frustration as he stood up on the bridge, rolling his shoulders to loosen the knots. "I'm going out into the forest to train. I'll be back later to ask if Kaiza comes back." "Alright," The young spirit grumbled as Naruto left the bridge. Moments later, after Naruto was out of sight, the white voided creature reappeared. Its scream rippled through reality, like a call for help or more likely a call for blood. After a long night of pushing his body and mind to its current limits, and then trying to inch his way past them, Naruto laid in the field sleeping, exhausted from the past few days, which allowed him at most 5 hours of sleep. This morning he had slept till about noon, which was normally very unusual, but Naruto's body was working overtime to repair any damage that had occurred during his training. Because of his late sleeping, many forest inhabitants began to scurry around him and climb on top of him, using the boy as a perch or an object of curiosity to distract them from their lives. The peaceful serenity of the forest animals did not last long, however, as a young girl walked into the clearing while carrying a basket that was half full of various herbs and roots usually used in healing elixir that those that believed in holistic medicines used and swore by, including many shinobi the world over. The girl saw the young man and rushed over to his side to check on him. She grabbed his chin and moved his head to get a good look at his face and was taken back. "So it's you?" the young girl said as she backed up. "You're the one who helped wound my master Zabuza," the girl announced to the unconscious boy, revealing herself to be Haku, the fake hunter nin who disabled Zabuza to make a getaway. "I should just kill you now," she murmured as her hand inched closer and closer to his neck, only to lose her resolve and shake the boy's shoulder. Naruto groggily rose from his nap, licking his lips and yawning as he tried to banish anything that reminded him of how peaceful his sleep was. "What's going on?" Naruto wondered aloud as he turned and suddenly found himself face to face with a very pretty girl. "I saw you on the forest floor and got worried," she said as she tilted her head and smiled. "You can catch a cold sleeping out here, you know," she told him as she reached out and brushed some grass off his shoulder. Naruto laughed. The notion of getting sick had become something of a foreign concept to him. "I don't get sick. I'm sorry, what's your name?" Naruto almost said boisterously, stopping when he realized he had little idea who he was talking to. "Haku," she said kindly as she extended her hand in greeting. "I came out here to pick some herbs for my poor father. He has been experiencing some rather brutal pain as of late," she said as she plucked several plants from the ground. "Oh, do you need any help?" Naruto asked as he leaned forward a bit to talk to the girl. The girl leaned back to avoid Naruto, blushing. She then smiled as she pushed him back. "Your help would be most appreciated," she told him as she instructed him on picking the right herbs and how to pluck them. The two worked and told stories of past experiences, Haku's of course altered to protect her identity, and Naruto's altered through pure exaggeration. The two laughed and picked herbs for what seemed like hours, and eventually they just sat and talked, laughing at each other's jokes and offering advice to each other on various things. After a while Naruto finally decided to bring up something that was on his mind. "So why did you and your dad come to Wave?" he asked bluntly. Haku stared back in shock. "What? Well, I'm pretty sure you're not from Wave. You seem too clean to be from the city which is falling apart and too well dressed to be from the countryside. Not to mention that your dress looks fairly new and expensive," Naruto explained as he pointed to the few things he could see. Haku froze. She didn't think of anything to say to that. She didn't believe that this kid could be so insightful and observant. She quickly reined herself in though. "My father is a chef with a dream of owning his own restaurant. We got stuck in Wave about 2 weeks ago when he came here looking for a fish that only lives in the sea around Wave. We've been stuck here ever since thanks to this Gato guy," she said, ending with a smile frown to sell the story. Naruto leaned forward again. This time Haku did not lean away. He put his hand on her shoulder and without smiling he began consoling her. "I swear to you, Haku. I will liberate Wave. I will inspire its people to rise up and throw off the chains that Gato has set upon them," he pledged. In a moment of weakness Haku began to cry, but quickly bottled it up and desperately tried to hold it in. "Why do you insist on doing these things? Fighting for people you barely know?" "Because I need to get stronger. For one reason or another I need to get stronger," Naruto said, looking solemnly to the ground as he tried to think of the reasons why he fought, and found nothing. "You're quite a violent person, I can tell," Haku said as she stood up. "You fight for power's sake, and gain power for fighting's sake, all in an effort to become stronger." She stopped suddenly as she turned around and began again. "Following this path will only make you lose your way. If you fight for reason, if you fight to protect someone precious to you, you will become truly strong. You will become a shield among a sea of blades. And without a word more, Haku left the clearing, opting not to throw in her usual curveball about her gender that would have marked her departure to let the message sink in more. Naruto simply sat there in shock as he stared at the place Haku had occupied mere moments ago, mulling over in his head the implications of Haku's words. "They call me a sage," he mumbled, "but I serve no purpose other than the kami's will," Naruto said in self-examination. "I'll never prove myself like that, but a shield among a sea blades, huh?" Naruto mumbled as he stood up from his spot on the forest floor and moved to leave the clearing. Tengu. Naruto found himself enjoying lunch with Sasuke and Sakura, who looked pretty well off for two people who were supposedly training that same morning. There were also shifty glances and stares shooting back and forth between Sasuke and Sakura, then him, as if he was the topic of a silent conversation. He quickly got fed up with the awkward silence and just erupted, "Alright you guys, what is it?" he asked, a little agitated by how odd the silence was. Sasuke swallowed whatever food he was chewing and sighed. "Listen you, and I know that Kakashi is more of a drill instructor than a proper teacher. That's why we need you to teach us your battle meditation." "My battle mediation isn't something I can just teach you guys," Naruto said, outraged by Sasuke's suggestion. "Naruto, your battle mediation technique made you stronger in an instant. We need that edge to defeat Zabuza and his accomplice," Sakura argued. "Anything Kakashi can actually teach us is probably too advanced at this point. We all need to be at our best. Now we have 3 days left, should be enough for you to teach us at one of your mantra things." Naruto began grumbling as he weighed his options. He couldn't let his team just die, but the mantras were his thing and the one thing that he could pass on to his family someday. But if he died here because his team wasn't prepared, then what was the point? "Alright, but I'll only teach you the most basic mantra. I call it effortless. It essentially allows you to attack or move with little to no effort by cutting your burn rate in half. I use it a lot when I practice Muay Thai or use the meditation upon motion mantra, which doubles my burn rate, so effortless bottoms out the ill effects," Naruto explained to Sakura and Sasuke. "So wait, you can stack the effects. Most jutsu don't do that even if they're totally different," Sakura exclaimed as she began taking notes on Naruto's mantras. "That's cause they're not jutsu. The mantras switch the strain from the physical to the spiritual aspects. The only danger I can think of is getting caught in the mantra endlessly, which would break your body down over time," Naruto said. Sasuke got confused quite easily. "What do you mean switching the strain to the spiritual and the endless mantra and the body breakdown?" Sasuke ranted, unsure of how to handle the foreign concept of Naruto's mantras. Naruto sighed as he went to explain, "Our spirit is like our body. It can go stronger with strain, but it will also be sapped of its power for a short time, causing an emotional deadness and a restriction on our chakras, our instincts and any spiritual senses that we have for a temporary period. Falling into a mantra endlessly would eventually crush your spirit entirely, leaving you an empty husk unable to use chakra, but it's highly unlikely. But if it does happen, or if you simply use a mantra too long, your body will begin to break down because its natural limiters are being ignored entirely. It's simple really, just stop with the questions, okay? I tell you everything you need to know when we start training," Naruto finished as he began eating again. "Alright, new technique time. What's the first step?" Sasuke said, eager to begin training again. Naruto then scowled, finishing him and Sasuke's little personality swap. "Let me finish my food." Tengu. The next few days went by slowly, mostly because of the training needed to begin using the mantras was a slow and somewhat boring process. However, after 2 days of constant meditation and stiff muscles, Sasuke and Sakura had already gotten the hang of activating the effortless mantra. By midday on the 3rd day, Naruto decided that they had effectively mastered the mantra effortless, which simply meant that they could control and fade in and out of the mantra fast enough to be used in combat. This meant very little though, as there was only one practitioner of battle mantra before them and he had created the technique only a month or 2 ago. The real achievement in all this was the 3 new mantras that had been developed by the end of the day. Sasuke managed to create a mantra that doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled his strength for brief periods of time but for an equal amount of energy burn. Sakura created a mantra that boosted her mental prowess, allowing her to actively use more of her brain's natural ability to process information by boosting her brain usage from the average 10 to 50%. Naruto, however, managed to create a mantra that had an outward effect. namely deflecting small projectiles, and if charged long enough it could create small craters. The three young ninjas trained themselves to the point of mental and physically exhaustion, but none more so than Naruto, as was custom. This is what set the situation the next morning. Exhausted and still sleeping, Kakashi made the decision to leave Naruto behind, with written instructions to operate as the family's guard when he woke up. It would be a nice day off for the boy for all the work he had done in the past week and as a reward for sharing his own technique with his team, something that any Shinboy found difficult to do as they were in general a secretive bunch. Naruto was still in his futon rolling around in his sleep as he was being bombarded with whispers much like the one that he encountered at the lake. The young sage saved my lake, my debts will be repaid, one more tale to tell, one last web to weave. The thief you seek will be a traitor, red-faced and long-nosed. The whispers echoed into his ears like a sultry siren's voice, and kept repeating the message. Suddenly Naruto snapped upward, shaken from his sleep by the same force that provided the voice. The force left suddenly too, leaving Naruto exhausted as any other person would be when waking up. Stretching his arms, Naruto got up and got dressed, and in his blind haste ripped his clothes right from under the note that had been put on top of his robes earlier. Cracking his neck and attaching his pouches of kunai and shuriken, as well as stashing his gourd into the sash that kept his robes bound. In a panic he hurried downstairs, realizing that his team had left him behind. As he made his way to the stairs he heard a commotion and shouting coming from the floor below. "Hey Waraji, I heard something upstairs. I'm going to check it out," an unfamiliar voice shouted out, followed by the clinking of a sword as he moved up the stairs. Naruto panicked, and tried to find a hiding place in the hall that he could use, but no such luck. At that point a long-haired man in a wool cap and a long heavy jacket stepped into the hall himself to see nothing. "I could have sworn I heard something," Zori, Gato's most trusted bodyguard, said as he walked through the strangely empty hall. Suddenly there was a creak from above. Zori quickly drew his sword expecting a sneak attack from above. However, there was no sign that anyone had ever been up there. "Damn ninja, got me freaking out and they're not even here," Zori mumbled before he heard Waraji scream from downstairs. In his rush he stumbled down the stairs and rolled, colliding with the wall. Though he was in pain, Zori managed to get up, but he was soon pinned down by a blade going into his shoulder and into the wall behind him. "Fucking ninja," Zori shouted out, only to be punched in the jaw and knocked out. Naruto sighed as he removed the blade from the samurai's shoulder and wiped it down before collecting high sword as well and deposting the two blades on the table. "Sorry about the blood," Naruto said off-handedly as he deposited the blades on the kitchen table. "It's no problem, Naruto-san," Tsunami said as she got up from the floor and stepped over the fallen body of Waraji to go and grab Inari. "You saved us. You saved me, and more importantly Inari, thank you." "Thank you," Tsunami said through her tears of joy. "You're welcome," Naruto responded with a slight smile, "but I need to know where my team went." "To the bridge. They went to guard my father together because they're afraid that since Zabuza is supposed to have been recovered today that they would need all hands on deck, but they left you here to hold down the fort," Tsunami said. "Tengu, what the hell is going on here?" Tazuna shouted as he ran up to one of his fallen friends who had been brutally butchered. "It seems like Zabuza decided to make a second attempt," Kakashi said as he felt a surge of chakra wipe over the area and summoning up a fog. "It's been a while, Kakashi," came the ubiquitous voice of Zabuza. "And I see that those brats still follow you, and just like last time that little brat is shaking in his boots, scared out of his mind." The cold raspy laugh of Zabuza followed as the area was soon filled with Zabuza clones. "I'm shaking in excitement," Sasuke grumbled as he began going through the two mantras he had learned the other day. "Go ahead, Sasuke," Kakashi encouraged with his patented eye smile. In a single motion Sasuke disappeared and then reappeared back in his starting point. The clones looked unaffected until they suddenly burst, sending water in every direction. Sasuke then dropped the mantras and smirked, not letting the slight exhaustion show. "It looks like these brats have matured into worthy rivals, I'd say. Too bad the blonde one isn't here. Lucky for him I have an epitaph ready for him when he becomes this squeed's sole survivor, the poet of Konoha. What do you think?" Zabuza chuckled, gaining the ire of Team 7. "Shut up," Sasuke shouted as he dashed forward only to be stopped by Haku. "You're good but not good enough," she commented as she knocked Sasuke's kunai hand out of the way and shoved him back. The two continued to trade blows, Sasuke with his knife and Haku with her needles. The battle went on and on with Haku holding the advantage. Sasuke then stared his berserk mantra to increase his strength again, ending in locked battle at double with Haku's needles slowly giving way. "You fell right into my trap," Haku said as she held up her free hand. "While both of us have our hands a bit tied up, only one of us can do this." A string of hand signs from Haku made Team 7's eyes widen, especially Kakashi. One-handed seals. That's nearly impossible. The level of control needed is beyond most shinobi, Kakashi thought as he witnessed his opponent perform a feat that was impossible to many. To think one so young has mastered that, he exclaimed. Sasuke began to focus his chakra as well, but while planning his escape, not willing to stay in the middle of the shower of attacks. Hijutsu Sensatsutsuisho, Haku cried out as the water leapt up from the ground and wrapped around the left back as the water clashed together around Sasuke like two walls of spikes. Team 7 gasped in horror, but the water dropped to the floor harmlessly, making the masked nin look around in a panic. "Too slow," Sasuke whispered as he whipped around to hit the masked nin in the face. Unfortunately, the punch was blocked, and when Sasuke went for the kick, the masked ninja ducked and knocked him away. Kakashi began laughing. "Looks like your advantage just left. A week ago you were dealing with wet behind-the-ear rookies. If this happened then you could have won for sure. But it only takes an encounter like our last to put all the academy lessons into perspective. They may not be hardened warrior like you or me, but they're fully capable, fully trained, fresh minds with fresh new ideas." "You've lost," Zabuza admitted. Zabuza snorted and snapped his fingers. His lackey nodded and stepped forward, performing another chain of hand seals. Once again the water leapt up from the floor and began forming into sheets. Hijutsu Makio Hyosho. The water froze into a series of mirrors that enveloped Sasuke in a dome. As Team 7 stayed focused on the mirrors themselves, Haku stepped into them and surrounded Sasuke, leaving no blind spot or exit for Sasuke to exploit. Kakashi sprung into action to try and rescue his student but was stopped by Zabuza. He could only watch in horror as his student was attacked from all ends and was nearly torn apart from a hail of needles. Sakura moved to go help Sasuke and threw a kunai in hopes that it would be enough for her to get in and out, but those hopes were ill-founded. Haku caught the kunai with ease and was about to toss it back when a shuriken flew at her from the other side and knocked her out of her mirror, leaving a nasty gash on her arm. An explosion then rocked the bridge as a plume of smoke began rising from one of the corners. "That idiot," Kakashi said as his face deadpanned at the sure stupidity of Naruto giving away his position. "Hey there everyone, Uzumaki Naruto at your service," Naruto announced as he saluted with one hand and kept the other limp and hanging obscured by the sleeve of his robes. Zabuza smirked and suddenly launched an attack, as well as Haku. A barrage of senbon and shuriken made their way for Naruto and he charged in straight ahead. Kakashi begged for him to stop, but his words fell on deaf ears. Naruto then smirked as he waved his arm. Seclusion of the sage. The projectiles suddenly fell to the floor, all except one which Naruto caught by the hole in its center. To any onlooker, though, it looked like the needles and shuriken had collided, causing an argument between Zabuza and Haku. Sasuke used this to his advantage and tried to plan an escape but was caught off guard by Naruto, who suddenly appeared beside him. "Hey Sasuke, I'm here to rescue you." This unfortunately just blew apart a barrel of restraint. "Are you retarded? No stealth, no caution, no tactics. Now both of us are stuck in here," Sasuke roared, catching the attention of their captor. "Well, fine, if you're going to be like that, I'll just leave," Naruto shouted back, letting his calmness slip up and let loose some pent-up rage. "No one is leaving," Haku announced as she muscled her way into controlling the conversation. Ice began to crawl up the gaps in the mirror, trapping them and keeping everyone out. "Then we'll just melt your mirrors, Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu," Sasuke roared as a ball of fire erupted from his mouth and hit the mirror. Steam rose from the mirror but revealed it to be unharmed, as well as the person inside the mirrors. "Fire won't melt this ice," Haku stated plainly in an uninterested tone, asserting that her two opponents weren't worth her time. "If that's not going to work, I'll just keep punching till I find you or these walls shatter," Naruto shouted as he leapt up into the air. Needles flew at him from all sides, only to stop suddenly and fall to the ground, like all the energy put into their motion had been drained. As long as I'm in seclusion, I will be a target too far for anything you throw to reach, no matter from where it's thrown, Naruto stated as he brought his hands together into a familiar hand seal. Kage Bushin, he announced as a cluster of clones appeared mid-air and aimed for a mirror. Haku panicked. Her main means of attack was disabled, leaving her defenseless against the blonde, and the dark-haired one was in the middle of the cluster. If she tried to get to him, she would be attacked for sure, and even if she could use ranged attacks on him, that still left the problem of the blonde. Screw it, she thought as she sprung into action. Using the superior speed granted by the mirrors, she leapt out and destroyed the clones with the Senbon grip-like claws before throwing them at the unsuspecting boy, embedding 3 in his shoulder before seclusion drained the others of their energy, making them fall harmlessly to the ground. This is going to take a while, Sasuke mumbled as he watched the mirrors in hopes of seeing anything that could help. Tengu. Meanwhile, Kakashi and Sakura looked on in horror as realization struck both of them. Itakiki Genkei, a bloodline, isn't it, sensei? That means your Sharingan is useless against it, right? Sakura asked, the wealth of knowledge that she had acquired coming into play. Yes, Sakura, but we have bigger problems. One is Zabuza. Now that our team is divided, he has an easier chance of dispatching his target with just you guarding him. 2 is Sasuke and Naruto are dealing with a hardened killer alone. Kakashi explained before dodging a slice from Zabuza. Focus, Kakashi, we still have to settle the score, Zabuza rasped out as he heaved the sword up again and began his attack. Kakashi ducked out the way and kicked Zabuza in the chest. Zabuza went stumbling back, but Kakashi managed to fly back by using the kick as a base of a jump. I'll make this quick, Kakashi said as he moved to his headband and grabbed the edge. As he did, Zabuza charged, knife at the ready. Kakashi tried to catch the blade but only managed to have it be shoved into his palm, all in the effort to protect his eye. Are you really that afraid of the Sharingan eye? Kakashi asked as he lifted up the headband. I fear nothing, Zabuza roared as he called out the Kirigakure no Jutsu, summoning up the thickest mist he could muster. Kakashi began to panic, unsure of how to read the situation. The mist is so saturated with chakra the Sharingan can't see a thing. Even without my Sharingan eye I can't see. How does he expect to fight in a mist this thick? Kakashi asked himself, only to hear slight noises before blocking the onslaught of attacks from Zabuza. You're a fool, Kakashi. I was a proud member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. We all know the silent killing technique. But only I was a true master. I can hunt you down by sound alone. Even the faintest heartbeat is a signal to me. Zabuza laughed out through the thick mist. Kakashi then realized what was going on. Locking onto Sakura's chakra, he ran towards her and sure enough began to sense Zabuza more clearly. He even began to hear the sound of the Mad Mont's blade. He moved to defend the bridge builder and his student. Too late. Zabuza bellowed as his blade cut through the air like a bolt of lightning. Tengu. Naruto was on his knees exhausted. Holding up seclusion for so long had worn on him, and at the first sign of the mantra being dropped, Haku bombarded him with Senbon. Sasuke was faring better, mostly unscathed. He had been dodging everything with great difficulty, but things were slowly getting easier. She's slowing down, that's good. Sasuke mumbled as he stood up on his exhausted legs. This is getting annoying, Haku said to herself as she launched another barrage of missiles, this time aimed at the prime threat. Sasuke moved and grabbed Naruto, pulling him out of the way of the incoming needles. Thanks, Naruto managed to say before going unconscious from the spiritual strain as Sasuke leapt out onto the field and tried to take down Haku. Sasuke stood still, watching Haku dash from mirror to mirror, seeing the faint blurs dashing across the air. Come on, focus, Sasuke berated himself, forcing his eyes to focus more and more, until the image of Haku became clear. No, it can't be. The Sharingan. Haku exclaimed in surprise. I need to end this, she said as she leapt out of her mirror once more, intent on killing one of her prisoners. She's going for Naruto, Sasuke said in realization as he moved to pick up Naruto, but realized he was too slow. He did the only thing he could think of. Tengu, you. Naruto groaned as he forced himself out of unconsciousness. The first thing he noticed was a familiar figure standing over him. Sasuke? Naruto asked weakly as he pulled himself onto his knee. Sasuke suddenly fell limp to the floor, bleeding from many places all over his body. Needles embedded into his trembled in shock, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. He sacrificed himself for you. Haku said plainly as she stepped out of her mirror in an attempt to get close and end this useless fight. He had the upper hand and would have won. But he gave it up all for you. Her voice grew colder and colder with each word. Pity. Her had such potential. When compared to you, she was trying to anger Naruto, make him sloppy, unaware of what beast she would unleash. Shut up, Naruto mumbled as he stood up, eyes obscured by his hair. What? Haku stammered, taken back by the malice irradiating from his voice. I said shut up. Naruto's face was contoured into a visage of rage as a cloak of red chakra overtook his form. I will kill you, Naruto bellowed, shaking the ice mirrors as Haku made a retreat into them. Suddenly a plume of yellow chakra erupted from him along with the red. The two began fighting for dominance, enveloping each other and blending together. His robe's top suddenly came undone as the spiritual fabric began to unravel and reform into a simple red silk cloak decorated with a sun symbol. The solar symbol on his chest began to warp as well, turning into a tapestry of tattoos extending over most of his pectoral and onto his back and shoulders. His hair turned a deep red and became long. It was picked up into the plumes of energy, whipping back and forth excitedly. His eyes turned a deep purple color, with a piercing and dominating gaze. He then took a deep breath and roared upward. An onlooker dressed in fine robes stood above the battlefield, surrounded by many others dressed like him. He nodded to the others as he cleared his throat. The young sage has awakened, his ascension has begun. Naruto's roar continued as the two plumes vanished in the midst of their blending. His face was then calm as he turned towards the real Haku, frightening her, forcing her to move, but he still followed. A deep breath was then followed by a hard expulsion. His chakra re-emerged in the plume, but this time it was a radiant orange. Fear the color of my aura, Naruto spoke harshly as he lifted his arm and slowly turned it around, bringing it into a fist. For it is an extension of my might. A hard punch was then thrown, shattering the dome and throwing Haku to the ground. You will suffer. Those were the last words Haku heard before a fist collided with her face, sending her world into darkness.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.